Good evening and welcome to the April 18th meeting of the Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals. Calling this meeting to order, and I'll ask the public to please silence your cell phones. And I'll introduce the board at this time. To my far right, your far left, is Jerry Patamas, who is an associate member of the board. To my immediate right is Ken Foreman. He is the vice chairman of the board. My name is TJ Hurry. I am the chairman. To my left is Ed Van Kuren, and welcome back, Ed. He is a full voting member of the board, followed by Bob Dugan, who is a full voting member as well. Also with us tonight is Noreen Stockman, who is our zoning administrator, and Joe Robbins, who is our recording secretary. The Zoning Board of Appeals is charged with applying the zoning bylaws for the town of Falmouth, and we consider requests for special permits, variances, and appeals as provided in the bylaws, which have been approved by town meeting and the Attorney General's office for the Commonwealth. All decisions made by the board are made through the public hearing process. The board's goal is to hear testimony from the applicant and from the public, and also to allow a full and fair discussion of the project prior to rendering a decision. To begin each hearing, the clerk will read the public announcement of the hearing and then present any pertinent information from the file, such as referrals from town departments and summarizing correspondences to and from the board. The applicant or the applicant's representative will then have 15 minutes to make a presentation, and time may be extended by vote of the board. The board will then question the applicant, and then the public will be invited to comment as well. Public comments should be directed only at the project itself, and I also ask you to please refrain from making any personal or derogatory statements. These comments can include an opinion in favor or in opposition, or it just might simply be a question about the nature of the project. The chair will limit discussion in the interest of time if comments become repetitive. All members of the public wishing to speak should wait to be recognized by the chair, should come to the podium to my right here, and I also ask you to please state your name and address for the record. And to conserve the amount of time, we usually limit public discussion to 2 minutes per person. We will then either close or continue the hearing. When the board is satisfied that enough information has been presented by testimony and in the file to make a decision by motion and vote of the board, the hearing will then be closed. Alternatively, we may continue the hearing to a future date and time certain. After the hearing is closed, no more testimony can be taken. We then may have board discussion and decision. The board may then further discuss the project among ourselves, and a motion to deny or approve will be made and voted upon. The motion will include a summary of key findings and conditions. An affirmative vote of 4 members, which is a supermajority, is required for approvals of motions on special permits, variances, and appeals. A split vote, such as a 3-2 vote, is a failure to carry and would result in denial of the project. Under Massachusetts general law, if a special permit is denied, the applicant cannot return to the board for 2 years unless the project is substantially different. And turning to our agenda for tonight, we have 2 new hearings. We also have 2 continuations, and we have some open meeting items as well. So to start for tonight, we have application 10-19, Pagani, trustees, 36 Hamilton Street, and T-Ticket.
And being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 40A, the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Patricia Quinn Pagini and David A. Pagini, trustees of Rochester, New York, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Section 243C and 24069E of the Code of Falmouth to construct a garage addition with workshop and habitable space above exceeding 20% of the lot coverage by structures and subject property known as 30 Hamilton Street, T-Ticket, Mass. Engineering, the same standard comments, water runoff, etc. The Board of Health, property located in Little Pond, LPSSA. It was Italian permit issued on 9/15/17. It remains open, otherwise no issues. No no other comments and 3 letters of opposition.
And for the applicant tonight?
Good evening, pardon me. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, my name is Kevin Clower, and I am an attorney with Ahmet Clower Law Firm here in Falmouth. I represent the applicants Patricia and David Pagani, the owners of 36 Hamilton Street, East Falmouth, and we're here tonight seeking permission to add a garage with living space above the existing single-family dwelling at the site. This property, 36 Hamilton Street, is located in Mara Vista, at the end of Hamilton, near to Great Pond. The lot is just 8,730 square feet, and it's located in the Residential C zoning district. The applicants have owned the property for almost 10 years. They're making changes because they're finding the existing footprint and the layout inadequate for their family and their needs, and they want to improve the usefulness and the aesthetics of the site. The existing dwelling is a 2-story, 6-bedroom home with a footprint of just over 1,500 square feet. It's non-conforming. The front yard setback to Hamilton Street is 12 feet, where 25 feet is required by the bylaw. The lot coverage is 17.3%. The existing ridge height is 22 feet, and it is connected to the Little Pond sewer service area. They're proposing to add a garage with a small workspace in the rear and living space above. This living space will accommodate a renovated master bedroom. It adds additional living space, which improves the usefulness of the property for the applicants in a really significant way. No other aspect of the footprint will be altered. The garage will not exacerbate the existing nonconformity, as it will be set back 25 feet from Hamilton Street. The existing front yard setback nonconformity will not be affected. There's no new nonconformities created. The resulting lot coverage of this will be 24.7%, which is allowable by special permit from this board. Due to the existing nonconformities and the increase in the lot coverage above 20%, this does require a special permit under both sections 243C and 24069E. 243C states that pre-existing nonconforming structures may be changed by special permit, provided they're not substantially more detrimental than what presently exists. The board is asked to consider the standards of 240-216, as well as whether or not the alteration creates a new dimensional nonconformity, impairs views and vistas, and reasonably conforms to the average dimensions in the neighborhood. The proposed renovations will have no impact on the existing nonconformity. There's no new nonconformity created. There's no impact on views and vistas from public ways. And as we will discuss, this does reasonably conform to the average dimensions of the structures in the neighborhood. The proposed lot coverage by structure, as I noted, is 24.7%, which is under the amount allowable by this board. Lot coverage by structures, paving, and parking will be 33.8%, which is well below the allowable 40%. Section 24069E, which is the section that allows a special permit for lot coverage in excess of 20%, asks the board to consider the size and height of the structure relative to the average in the neighborhood, the effect of shadow on adjacent properties, the impacts on views and vistas from public ways, and the effect of nitrogen on coastal embayments. As to views and vistas, this is going to be a visible structure. However, it's not going to be considerably more visible than what presently exists. The proposed ridge height of it is 21 feet, which is lower than the existing 22-foot ridge height. And it will not negatively impact any views or vistas from public ways. There's no appreciable impact of shadow. The abutters to the west and north are both located approximately 50 feet away at the nearest point. As to size and height, the bylaw doesn't define exactly what we're supposed to look at, but by practice, we look at gross building area, footprint, and lot coverage. I did submit a comparison worksheet showing the homes within 300-foot radius of this site. In that comparison, you'll see that 6 of those homes have larger footprints, 4 of them have larger gross building areas, an additional 4 are within 200 square feet of this gross building area, and 8 have lot coverage in excess of what we're proposing. All of this is to say that when weighed against the average of the neighborhood, this is by no means an outlier. There's no effect of nitrogen on coastal embayments. It is hooked up to the Little Pond sewer, and it will have the same number of bedrooms as presently exists. Anticipating a question from Chairman Hurry, I do want to note the applicants are willing to remove the shed that's on the site. We are aware of opposition, the 3 letters of opposition that have been filed relative to this application, but I think it's really important to note that all of those letters reference preservation of private views. The bylaw asks the board to consider the impact of on views and vistas from public ways. It does not protect private views. Absent of view easement, of which there are none for this property, these private views are not protected and should not be a consideration of the board. Relative to the considerations set forth in the bylaw, there are no detriments to this project, and certainly none that could be considered substantially more detrimental than what presently exists. For these reasons, and given these considerations, I would ask that the board grant the special permit. I'd be happy to address any questions that you might have at this time.
Thank you, Attorney Clower, and especially for addressing the shed issue. Someone's got to continue that.
Get right
line
out in front of it.
questioning. Now that Kim's no longer on the board, so I appreciate that. Before we turn to board questions, those of you in the doorway, please feel free to come in and grab a seat. There's 2 good seats front and center if you're interested in sitting there, just so we have everyone in here. All right, and we'll turn to board questions at this time. Bob, do you want to get us started?
Yeah, I just have a question regarding to the bedrooms. So I noticed there's 6 bedrooms in your plan, so does the town accept it right now as a 6-bedroom home?
I'm not aware of any, I mean, referrals were sent to the town, and nothing came back saying that there was an issue with the plans. The existing conditions is 6 bedrooms. It was 6 bedrooms and hooked into the sewer. I don't know of anything beyond that.
Right, that's all I have.
Ed, any questions?
No comment.
Ken?
I have no question.
Jerry?
No questions. I think it was very well done, and I think the flow neutral bylaw allows existing number of bedrooms before the sewer and to after, so I don't know if that's Amy Lowe's call or if you got heard from her or not.
Like I said, there was nothing came in on the referrals relative to the bedroom count
That's, okay.
that I'm aware of.
Anything else, Jerry?
No, it's a good project.
Since this is a corner lot with, I think that's Great Bay off to the side, is there any issue with, since you don't have the footage on the front, I believe the front setback, is there any talk with the building commissioner calling the bay side as the front yard?
That
or-
hasn't come up in conversation. The typical rule of thumb is when one meets the requirement of 25 feet and one doesn't, you'd use the one that meets the requirement. But it looks here as though we've got 20 feet, 20 and a half feet on, to Great Bay and 12 feet to Hamilton. I don't know what the actual usefulness of Great Bay Street is, so there hasn't been any change to that. Beyond that, we haven't had a discussion as to a front yard designation. We're not opposed to doing it, I just don't know that it makes a practical difference for the project.
Thank you. Jerry?
Follow-up question. I did have a chance to read the project file. Does this need a notice of intent from Concom?
I believe an RDA was filed with Concom.
And,
I think it was, actually, the engineers.
so no response then from
Yeah,
them?
it was the engineers actually
Oh.
here, and it did pass with an RDA. The RDA was approved.
And Noreen, do we have that in the?
Nothing from Concom.
Okay.
We're happy to submit that to the file.
Anything else, Jerry?
No.
Any other questions from the board right now? Seeing none. Any members of the public have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? I know there's a lot of you out there. Might not be here for this project. Anyone? Okay, seeing none, back to the board. What would be the board's pleasure?
Move to close the hearing? Oh, I don't think there's any need for discussion before closing the hearing. We all had minimal questions.
Is everyone all set?
All set.
Okay. Jerry?
Move to close the hearing.
Second.
Motion closed by Jerry and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
How would the board like to proceed? Not everyone at once.
I'll move to approve if you'll help me with the legal nuances. I think the attorney laid out all the reasons why we can't approve in accordance with our regulations.
All right. Is there, second for now, and we'll dive into findings.
Second.
Okay. Jerry, do you want us to get us started with findings?
Hold on, let me get my notes. Is no substantial detriment to the neighborhood. No existing impacts on public vistas. No increase in bedrooms. There will be habitable living space above the garage, which is going to be a bedroom, so they'll have to put it above the bedroom. In the discussion, we can find out what happens to that other bedroom.
I think it's also worth noting about the views of Vista, given the concerns of the abutters, that Attorney Clower represented to us that there's no sort of view easement on the property.
Yes, there's no
Well,
view,
that-
yeah, that's, okay, in addition to.
Our bylaws don't address that.
And
I-
it is on the sewer system.
I think based on Attorney Clower's presentation, submission to the board, we don't have an issue with bulk density.
And that the proposed addition is, I believe it's roughly 1 foot shorter than what's existing now
At the ridge, yeah.
at the ridge line.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're
And they're
still,
also removing the shed, just getting that one.
this might be a condition, but we're still waiting on a RDA from Conservation Commission.
So if we do pass this, then I think we need to have some reference to that.
Most
To the
definitely,
RDA,
Yeah.
right.
could be a condition.
The front yard setback will be remaining at 12 feet. No new nonconformities created. Anything else? All right, how about conditions
Per plan,
per plan?
subject to a Concom RDA being issued? Or something akin to that?
Well, approval
Yep.
of the project and any conditions that might result, right?
Yes, but they enforce their own conditions.
Right, but it's nice when we also
Fine, I just,
reference.
Should we make reference to the amount of bedrooms? You know,
I think I
given
thought yeah,
It is on the sewer, but,
it's on the sewer, it's capped, the existing bedrooms are 6, and after the project, it'll be limited to 6, remain 6.
all right. Does that do it for conditions?
I think so.
Yep.
All right, so that motion was made by Jerry and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
One note to Mr. Clower, in the future, it's been very helpful to the board if your narrative bullets are put up there. No, seriously.
I know, just, it's time constraints.
Okay.
Yep.
I think it's in the file, but.
It is.
And up next tonight, we have application 11-19, Noon Trustees, 2 Nashon North and West Falmouth.
Being, excuse me, being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11, Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that David and Sherry Noon of Needham, Massachusetts, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Section 240-69E of the Code of Falmouth to add a pool exceeding 20% coverage, lot coverage by structures on subject property known as 2 Norshon North, West Falmouth, Mass. Engineering is standard comments about water runoff. Engineering project is fine with the health providing permit pulled for the relocation of the septic tank, septic system. And no comments, no letters.
For the applicant tonight?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Matt Terry. I'm an attorney at Ament Clower here in Falmouth. I represent David and Sherry Noon, trustees of Noshon North 2 Realty Trust, which is the owner of 2 Noshon North Falmouth and the applicant in this matter. The property is located on the corner of Cliff Road and Noshon North in West Falmouth, just south of Old Silver Beach. The property is on a lot of 15,010 square feet and is located in the Residential B zoning district. The dwelling on the lot is a recently completed 4-bedroom home with a footprint of approximately 2,942 square feet. The dwelling itself is conforming to front, side, and rear yard setbacks, as well as to coverage by structure and lot coverage by structures, paving, and parking. In developing the property, the applicant has made the determination to add a pool and a hot tub to the rear yard. These relatively modest additions with a combined additional footprint of 480 net square feet will result in lot coverage by structures of 22.8%. As such, the applicants are asking for a special permit under zoning bylaw 24-69.e, which states that lot coverage by structures of up to 25% may be allowed by special permit by this board. The bylaw goes on to state that the board should consider the size and height of the structure in relation to the average size and height of structures in the neighborhood, the effect of shadow on adjacent properties, the impact on views and vistas from public ways, and the effect of nitrogen on coastal embayments. This application is somewhat unique in that the trigger for the lot coverage is a pool. So while still a structure, it's not a structure as envisioned by this particular bylaw. The dwelling has been built entirely by right, and the pool is the only issue relative to this permit. The addition of the pool will have no impact on the size and height of the dwelling and will itself not have an impact on the neighborhood. There is no shadow effect on adjacent properties, and there is no impact to views and vistas from public ways, and there will be no effect on nitrogen on the coastal embayments. I prepared and submitted a spreadsheet of the size and height of structures of properties in the neighborhood, and note that of the surrounding properties, there are a number of properties with similarly sized footprints and lot coverage percentages by structure. Given all of this, the dwelling and lot, both as existing and proposed, certainly fall within an appropriate range in relation to the average size and height of structures in the neighborhood. The applicant's proposal will not be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than what presently exists. The project will not cause any adverse effects, and there will be no new nonconformity. No public view or vista will be impaired, and the project meets the standards of Section 24-216. The project also meets, therefore, the criteria of Section 24-69E, and we ask that you grant the special permit. I'd be glad to address any questions that the board may have regarding this project, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Attorney Terry. And just before we turn it to the board, I see there's some people again peering in. There's 2 good seats right up front here if you care to take a seat. There's a few heads back there. If anyone's interested, please come in. All right, we'll turn it to board questions. Jerry, do you want to start us off?
I'm assuming the large increase by structures, paving, and parking is due to the pool, because it's not a structure, correct?
It's due actually to a couple of different elements. The tarmac surrounding the pool counts for that calculation. And then, as you can see at the rear, they are, the applicants are demolishing an existing patio and first floor deck. Decking counts as structure, and they're replacing it with a raised terrace. So it's really the curtain around the pool.
But the pool is not covered,
The
it's not
pool-
considered a structure.
The pool itself is considered a
Oh,
structure.
it is? Okay,
Yes.
sorry.
Yeah, so for purposes of the relief we're seeking, it's really just the dimensions of the pool itself that are
Thank you.
considered. Yep.
Anything else, Jerry?
No,
Ken?
So you're replacing decking with a patio, or you're going the other way? You're creating more
No,
lot coverage,
they,
altering the deck?
we're removing structure by removing the deck.
I see.
And
So
then.
you can get below 40%.
Well, and so that the nonconformity at 22.8% is less impactful.
Okay. But your total lot coverage by paving, parking, and structures, so it's the paving around the pool, if I'm on, you're saying gets you up to 39.
That's correct, and underneath the maximum allowable percentage. So that's why we're just before the board tonight on the lot coverage by structure.
What's the nature of that paving? Is it macadam, or what is it?
The paving that is around the pool area is sort of the typical poolside, slip-resistant material. I'm not exactly sure, what it's made out of, but that's the pool patio area that surrounds the pool itself.
But it's not permeable.
No, and that's why it's included in that second calculation.
Are there any drainage issues?
No.
Okay.
Anything else, Ken?
Nope.
Okay, Ed?
No comment.
Bob?
No questions.
The location of the pool itself looks pretty tight up against the property line. Is there any sort of retaining wall or anything like that proposed?
You'll see that there is a proposed retaining wall that runs along the back end, the northwest facing side of the pool. That has an elevation of 56.3, and it will run along at the external edge of that curtain for the pool, and then we'll continue taking a 90-degree turn, running parallel to the 30-foot length of the pool, in part to provide shielding, but also to comply with building codes, which require that pool areas be fenced in for health and safety reasons.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch the elevation of that.
56.3.
Any other questions from the board right now?
Excuse me, did you say 36 or 56.3?
56.3.
Thank you.
So we'll turn it to the public. Any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Anything at all? All right, seeing none. All these people not here for this project either.
Just try not to be disappointed.
Motion to close?
Back to the board. We satisfied?
I'm satisfied.
Okay. Motion to close, made by
Second.
Jerry, second by Ken. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And how would we like to proceed?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, made by Jerry and Ed. On to findings.
Not substantially detrimental to the neighborhood. No increase in the number of bedrooms. It's within the allowable coverage by structure of 22.8. It's going up from 19.6. Paving and parking is 39.7%, and it went, allowable is 40%, and the existing was 27.6%. Is this, I forgot, is this tied into the sewer?
No, they're relocating the septic.
Yeah, plan
Okay,
shows
so-
septic.
Okay. So septic tank has to be adequate, or will be adequate. Do we get anything from the Board of Health on this?
No.
I think they mentioned there's a septic tank that needs to be relocated.
Okay, so
Yeah, that was the only-
that's an important finding.
Right.
And I think the plan showed that, so.
Yeah.
All right, and the increase in coverage is primarily due to the pool, and to accommodate that, they will be demolishing or partially demolishing the patio and another structure, I believe.
That was the pavement around the pool, not the pool itself.
Both.
Is it both?
Right, well, what's
Okay.
proposed?
And it meets 240-216 and 240-69E.
All right, anything else for findings? Testimony have it that there was actually no runoff.
Yeah, that's worth it.
That is worth noting to address engineering's concerns.
Bulk was about the same. What did he say that? It was all the attorneys look alike tonight.
All right, anything else for findings? Moving on to conditions
Per plan,
per plan.
subject to Board of Health approval with relocation of septic tank.
Okay, anything else?
Just, should also be subject to the engineering comments, the referral.
All right. Anything else for conditions?
I think that's enough.
Okay. Motion to approve was made by Jerry and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
The drawings, maybe. Okay, and up next, we have application 115-18. This is a continuation. Woods Hole Partners LLC, 533 Woods Hole Road in Woods Hole. And Attorney Clower, before you begin, I believe there's a bit of a deadline issue. We do have a form for you to sign regarding an extension of the time period, if you'd be amenable to that.
How long of an extension are we looking for?
Bob, I think it's on the front there.
There's no,
What do we ask? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Noreen, maybe you can help us out?
You can fill it in for the date that you're extending to from today, but where you're at the time deadline, you need the written consent.
Right, okay. So I think where we are in the process, you're still awaiting planning board approval? And
Yes.
as you know, that this board does not issue any decisions until we've received that, so I believe we might be looking at May 2nd as a continuation date in order to get the planning board documentation,
Certainly fine with that.
if your schedule allows for that date.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So May 2nd?
Let's see.
That's better.
That's what I'm on.
Won't put us to sleep.
Choose the language.
You want more light?
No, I
need
was
more-
just wondering if I should go look for more chairs. There's people out in the hall.
Is there any in the hall?
I think there's some right up the hall.
You may want to see how many people are here for this hearing versus the next one. Mr. Chair?
Yep.
just How many people are here for this hearing versus the next one, determine if we need more chairs.
Well, we do have, are there any chairs in the hallway, Noreen?
Some right up the hall, maybe.
Might be worth bringing some in.
Mr. Chairman, if you'd like to take the hearings out of order, because it looks like almost everybody is here for the last hearing on your schedule, that would be acceptable to Woods Hole Partners.
Thank you for offering that, Attorney Hammond.
Do we have to make a motion?
I would make that motion.
I would second it.
So Ken's making the motion to take Locust Field LLC, application 619, out of order. Jerry, you're seconding that?
Of course.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we'll wait just a minute to get resituated here. Noreen, we've decided to partially resolve the issue by taking Locust Field out of order.
May I change?
We'll be taking Locust Field first. Attorney Ahmed is amenable to that.
Yeah, so I'll take our plans down.
Oh, here it is. Added fence and also. Unit 2.
Yeah, that was.
10 foot.
This was the issue.
We're going to. No. That's presumptuous. It's for a plan.
That's my measuring device. Could be close to 10.
Okay, so if anyone's waiting out in the hallway, we are taking Locust Field first. Please feel free to come in. We have new good seats still available up front. And I just ask that the entrance to the room not be blocked because that's against fire code and we can't have that during a public meeting. All right, so we'll get started with application 6-19, Locust Field LLC, 0 Locust Field, Lot 2 in Hatchville. Jerry, with those new seats over there, is there an actual way to get in and out?
If I can make it back. Yep. And we could take, someone could move over there.
Good.
It's not that far to jump out of the window.
Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Never
All
gonna
right.
come back.
And And for Locust Field tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Laura Moynihan. I'm the applicant's attorney, who is here tonight. Dan McClone, the principal of Locust Field LLC. So this is a continuation of the hearing from March 7th. My intention tonight, if it's acceptable to you, Mr. Chairman, is just to summarize the plan changes and then make some comments on some of the additional information that's been filed in the record. Okay, thank you. So since the last hearing, the plans have been revised at the suggestion of the board to increase the setback from the side yard on Lot 2 to 10 feet. That meets the zoning bylaw requirement. The plans have been revised as well to add fencing along the north and south property lines. The plans have been revised to show a vegetated buffer that can be restricted from removal along the north and south property lines. We filed an aerial photo with the board showing the extent of the vegetative cover along these property lines that currently exist. This vegetation, of course, could also be maintained by abutters if they feel additional buffer area is needed. We have supplied information to the board to address the statements of those who testified at the last hearing and have since submitted written correspondence to the board, which you have. So as your file indicates, essentially, for every resident of the town that's opposed to this project, there is a relatively equal number in support of the project. I would also submit that the majority of the form letters you received that were submitted in opposition as so-called neighbors to the project site many of them do not have addresses on them, so there really is no way to tell if their statement as to the impacts of the project on them is characteristic of their proximity to the project site. I think I counted about 9 or 10 only that had actually had addresses on them. One of the copies of the letter, for example, was mailed to Timothy Bourne Cartway, which is nowhere near this project site. So I think that's relevant to some of the nature of that opposition without addresses of residents. Having said that, I do understand there are people that are opposed to the project that have strong feelings about it. In that spirit, we've tried to work with the abutters on an acceptable fencing proposal. But as stated at the last hearing, $40,000 to $50,000 worth of fencing is just not a reasonable cost that this project can afford. The proposal that we made was rejected by the abutters through their council, and the abutters chose to continue to oppose the project as a result, which is their right. However, the 40B legislation, as you know, was enacted exactly to address what has occurred here, to essentially mandate towns to create affordable housing even in the face of opposition from those who are against it, to really address under the so-called anti-snob zoning legislation some of the claims that have been made in this case. For example, one of the abutters, Mr. Bento, has claimed in his letter to the residents, and I quote, if this G blank dam 40B can happen next to me and Bill, it can happen to you. You don't need a lot of acres to produce a 40B. If not for this legislation, I think it's fair to say that very little, if any, affordable housing would be produced in our town. The legislation's role is to operate in exactly these circumstances. It is perfectly appropriate for the board, even in the face of many resident comments, to take the position that it is mandated by state law to approve the housing until such time as the town's affordable housing stock increases beyond the 10% statutory minimum. Currently, we are at about 6%. Further, I question if many of those in opposition and who have signed letters were provided with the correct facts. The evidence that's in your file that's been provided shows that the substantial acreage of land available for agricultural use in the town is at least 85% of the 28,500 acres. The data provided by the Abutters Council today indicates that about 1% of the agricultural land in the town of Falmouth is now devoted to affordable housing, a very small percentage. I also would submit the site is outside of any designated zone of protection to Maris Pond or Long Pond according to the published maps. These maps are in your file. They are published for a reason, so as to establish where impacts on these resources may come from. It is not from this site. The groundwater flow is not to Maris Pond. Mr. Boselli was not able to be here tonight to testify to that fact, but I did ask him to write a statement, which I will read to you. It's very short, essentially stating that the groundwater flow is not to Maris Pond. On behalf of the applicant in the above referenced matter, this letter is provided to confirm that the groundwater flow from the project site is not towards Maris Pond. It has always been my understanding that groundwater flow within the town of Falmouth is generally to the west and south. Maris Pond is located to the east of the site. In addition, I have attached a groundwater flow map from the Cape Cod Commission that shows the direction of the groundwater to be to the west and southwest of the project site. Also, that the posted speed limit is 25 miles per hour on Locust Field Road, and site distances are in your file that have been measured and accepted by the town engineer as exceeding acceptable standards. So again, the claims in these letters that there's a traffic danger there, not supported by the evidence. If there's a problem with people speeding on Locust Field Road, then the appropriate remedy is to call the police. It's not to try and stop affordable housing projects in a 25-mile-an-hour posted zone. Also, I wonder if those in opposition were told or know that there are many other uses that can be done on this property other than 12 single-family homes. I've given you examples of those uses in the written correspondence. A child care facility, I've given you an illustration of. A very large building, outdoor playgrounds, meeting and conference rooms, high trip generator, a nursery operation with over 30,000 square feet of greenhouse buildings, retail sales buildings, sheds, etc., retail customers, backhoes, trucks, deliveries to and from the site, high trip generation. A private club with a restaurant and a bar, liquor license, music, weddings, parties, and other events. Again, much higher trip generation. This evidence was offered to the board because the claims have been that only one single-family home could be built on the property. That's clearly not true. Today we received a last-minute letter from the abutters attorney, and I think that the board can readily address or dispense with some of the comments in that letter. These new issues written about today deal with lighting. Final plans are reviewed by the board prior to issuance of a building permit typically, which can include the location of the residential pole lighting that's proposed off the driveways, all of which will be located on the street side of the houses and not shining onto abutter properties. Suggesting that a traffic study be required for a development that will create one peak hour trip per home, 12 trips, in accordance with the ITE rates, is an attempt to delay the proceedings and essentially wear down the developer with significant costs. The trip generation does not even meet the 25 trip peak hour standard under the Falmouth bylaw for mitigation or under the Cape Cod Commission regulations for traffic evaluation. It would not be required for a non-40B development. To also suggest that there is some adverse impact because 195 acres of land in the town are devoted to affordable housing in an agricultural zone is not accurate. This is 195 acres of 11,000 acres, or about 1%. Further, the list provided notes 48 projects, only 21 of which are on agricultural land, and 4 of those are previously developed sites. To suggest that the butters are concerned about water pressure for a water main loop at a $30,000 cost is again an attempt to bog the developer down in cost, essentially and quite frankly in the hopes the project goes away. If there's a public safety issue from a dead-end main, then we have a serious problem in the town with many dead-end mains that do exist. It is not a public safety issue. It would be better, and it would be better maintenance for the DPW, but that's it. If it was a public safety issue, the town would be scrambling to correct the existing dead-end mains. This is not a town regulation, and there's no basis for requiring it, as I've indicated. It is clearly an uneconomic condition when not supported by a regulatory requirement. The same goes for denitrifying septic systems as suggested. There's no regulation to require it, and it's an additional significant cost to the project. Now, notwithstanding all of that, I believe it's time to circle back to why we were here. The board's role in this case is not to look at this like the board might on a special permit project. It is not the standards of 240, 216. It's not weighing the benefits versus the detriments. Those are not the tests, and that's not the evaluation for the board. It's a comprehensive permit application. The 40B legislation was created to remove from the board's consideration matters, quite frankly, such as the abutters fencing or wooded buffers, neighbors wanting the housing in some other area of town, or other issues such as claims of traffic issues, effects on Mayor's Pond, need for denitrifying septic systems, none of which are supported by the evidence. You have to look to what the police department, fire department, town staff, engineering department have said about the project. This has been under review now for almost a year within the town. It's gone through an extensive review. The legislation is in place favoring approval of projects without conditions that can't be met. The project budget can't be met until the town reaches its 10% minimum. Imposing conditions on a project that are uneconomic to the project is simply not authorized by the regulations when there's no evidence to support that those conditions would meet any local concern. This project is clearly one that is needed in the community. You have ample evidence to that effect. You have all that information in your file. You have the Board of Selectmen's endorsement of the project, partnering with the developer to DHCD for the LIP approval. The Affordable Housing Committee has supported it. The Falmouth Housing Trust has supported it. Cape Cod Commission has supported the town's efforts in this project, and the Planning Board voted to support it. The project meets the standards suggested by the Affordable Housing Action Plan of 4 units per acre, even if the open space, as has been suggested, is not considered in that calculation. The issues in terms of the acceptability of the evidence as far as the DEP maps goes, those have been accepted by the board on the Gifford Street project recently. The Gifford Street project, also located in an agricultural district, was found in its decision to be consistent with the Affordable Housing Action Plan by this board. And that project was recently approved as 20 units on just over 1 acre. So taking all that into effect, I expect you're going to hear a number of comments tonight, and I would just ask you to keep those considerations in mind. Where is the evidence? We don't have it here. We have to look at what the 40B legislation requires the board to do, and not weighing benefits versus detriments. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Moynihan. Board questions? Bob, do
Yes.
you want to start us off? Or
Okay.
Jerry, if you wanted to?
No, Bob.
No, just on the fencing that was proposed in the plan, how did you come up with the exact footage of the fencing on each side?
Well, on the plan, the revised plan that was filed,
Yeah, the fencing that you're proposing now only goes in so far, so how did you figure out what that point would be?
well, on the north side, we had placed it between the two lot lines, figuring that that was a suitable buffer to the house on the north side. On the south side, the board had asked us to flip the house on Lot 2 to extend that buffer or setback to that lot line. So we interpreted that to mean to bring the fencing to the end of Lot 1 only because that buffer had been increased.
And once they, when you do a project like this and you do the excavation, how much of that buffer will actually remain? Because when I walked the site,
Well, I
it seemed
did,
like it was, pretty sparse.
I spoke to the developer about that to just confirm that that 5-foot vegetated buffer could be maintained because you have septic systems going in as well, and he assured me that it could. I mean, certainly that would be a required condition.
That's all I have.
But since she's on the fencing, how high is the fencing? That was,
6 foot high.
okay. Thank you.
Anything else, Bob? Ed, anything?
Yeah, was there any consideration, well, let me first ask you, what's the time frame for building this? I think I read somewhere it's gonna be phased, 3 buildings at a time.
Yes, the
What's the total time frame for the whole 12?
developer has requested the phasing of the project. It's in the permit application, I believe it's over 1 year. So he would like to start right away.
For 1 year to complete all 12 buildings?
Is that about, yes, that's correct. I don't have the exact dates in me, it's in the application, but he's saying yes, it is a year.
Okay, then the next question is, I believe some of the abutters have complained about the truck traffic associated with the construction. Was it looked at to go out the back underneath the power lines to Gifford Street for truck traffic during construction to appease the neighbors? And if not, why not?
We have not looked at that. I don't know if is there access back there? I don't think the lot line goes all the way to Gifford Street,
No,
so.
short about 10 or 15 feet
Right.
in that area.
So
And that's town-owned land, so
Yeah,
I think something could be worked out with the
we
town.
could certainly make that request,
I think it'd
of the town, if that would help the situation.
I think it would.
Certainly be willing to request it. I don't think we could say that it could be mandated as a condition, because we don't have the right to say that we can cross the town-owned land. It would have to be a voluntary situation, and if it could work and the topography
But
allows
you might
for
have some friendly neighbors instead of,
access in
Yeah.
there, yes.
Okay, that's
So a type of voluntary arrangement to pursue that
Yeah.
would be fine.
okay. That's it.
Ken, any questions?
Remind me, during the phasing then, will you be building an affordable unit in each phase?
Correct, yes.
And so have you identified which units are affordable?
Yes, they're shown on the plan.
Looking for that, I don't see it.
2, 3, and 5.
Okay.
The lighting, are you amenable to low-impact lighting? I'm not completely sure what that means, but there's gonna be no lighting in the back shining on abutters' properties. So the lighting will be public street lighting as available, or maybe pole lighting that might be required by an association. for every walkway or something like that, is that correct?
Right, the proposal of the developer is to put a driveway pole lighting on the street side of the property. Generally speaking, you know, even a subdivision approval would have some sort of condition that there not be any lighting that shines on to abutter properties. So that would be agreeable, obviously, here as well, because that's a standard condition.
Another question is, I'll ask the question anyways. Why is the loop water main, which is not mandatory, why does that break the bank?
Well, it's estimated to be a $30,000 cost. If you look at the budget for this proposal, which is in your file, the return rate here is about 10%, which is very low. The DHCD regulations define a reasonable return as 15%. The reason that this has been accepted is because the developer is voluntarily limiting the sale prices of the market rate units. I mean, there is a ceiling on those units, but his goal all along has been to try and to be able to provide those market rate units also at an affordable affordable price. Some affordable housing developments you'll see where the affordable units are built and then the market rate units are selling at $500,000-$600,000. So there's excess profit in there. And typically on the initial pro forma for these developments, you might see the return, in my experience, calculated around 14 or 15%. Here the return is 10%. So it's a very tight budget. And that's why I say that, you know, this effort to request condition after condition after condition, I mean, with these projects, it breaks the bank, and that's the reality of it.
One
So-
last question. I think it was the planning board that had some interesting comments. You know, one said reduce the number of houses by one, which I'm not gonna ask that question, but the other suggested that you could increase the density by one. You wanna?
Well, you know, we've tried here to be sensitive as best as possible to the neighborhood, and increasing the density, you know, this room would be twice as full. So, you know, that's the issue, right? I mean, you're trying to create a balance there between the need for affordable housing, so, and the density that's being proposed. If you went up one more unit, you're gonna go up one more unit, I'm not sure that's really gonna make a difference in the number of affordable houses that are being provided. The budget's not gonna support 4 affordable homes if you go up one more unit. So if you go up to provide one more affordable unit, you're gonna have to increase the market rate units by probably 2 or 3 more market rate units. Now you have an increase in density of, you know, 3 or 4 more homes.
I've
So,
got the answer.
yeah, it's
I
not
was
just,
asking on behalf of
the
the
short
planning
answer
board.
is it's not just one unit
Okay,
in
thank you.
reality, and we felt that was more than we wanted to do.
No further
Anything else,
questions?
Ray? Nothing? Okay. With regard to the septic systems, and if maintaining the vegetative buffer is an issue with the 5 feet to the side, was there any consideration to maybe 1 or 2 large systems to service the entire project?
Well, again, it's a cost issue, something like that, you know. I mean, it's just not supportable with the project. So, you know, here, again, when you look at the regulations, the board is charged at looking at these requirements versus would it be a requirement for a non-40B development? It's not. Under our local bylaw, under Title V, there's no requirement for a D-night system. So, you know, the project doesn't support that kind of cost here. That's just the bottom line.
Well, maybe not a D-nights system, but maybe perhaps a more traditional system.
Well, a treatment plant system is still, you know, that's probably 100,000 or more, easy. I mean, Dan probably, you know, Mr. Buselli isn't here to give that number, but again, those are really significant costs.
And with regard to letters received in opposition and in favor, you made mention that some were opposed without local addresses or lack of addresses. Is it a fair assessment that letters that were received in support, I mean, there were also from townwide, is that a fair assessment?
I think it is. The difference, however, is that the letters in opposition are making specific claims about what's going on in this particular neighborhood and how the project will impact it. And that was my point, that unless you know where these people live, you know, how it goes to the weight of that testimony, that's all.
Any other questions from the board at this time?
Yeah, just one question. On the placement of the affordable units, lots 2, 3, and 5, is there any reason they're only on one side of the street, not the other?
Two, 3, and 5. I don't think there really is any particular reason for that. Is that objectionable?
Well, no, I'm just wondering if you'd be able to at least put one on the other side, just so it's more, it seems like they're all kind of weighted in one section versus spread throughout the unit, the complex.
We could look at that.
Jerry, did you have a question?
Yeah, you did not cost out the price of a separate conventional septic system that serves multiple homes, you know, whether you needed two. I mean, my calculation is $20,000 times approximate for a septic tank, which might be a little bit high, would be $240,000 for the septic tanks.
For individual Title V systems?
Yeah, it's probably high at 20,000
I think it's a lot cheaper than that. I think it's more like 5 to 7 per house.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. You know, if you add the D-night, it's probably doubling that.
Any other questions? Okay, since there are a lot more faces out there in the crowd and seats that weren't there when the meeting first opened, I just want to go over the rules for public comment, especially if you haven't attended a meeting or if you weren't here for the first Locust Field hearing. So public comment should be directed only at the project, and we also ask members of the public to please refrain from making any personal or derogatory statements. Any comments that you do make can be an opinion in favor or in opposition, or it just might simply be a question about the nature of the project. We do limit discussion in the interest of time in the event that things do become repetitive. As former chair said, it's quality, not quantity, over comments. All members of the public wishing to speak should wait to be recognized by me, and please come up to the podium to the right, state your name and address for the record. And we typically do limit comment to 2 minutes each. And sir, I see you standing over there.
Could I be recognized on behalf of the direct abutters?
You may.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board members. My name is Mark Riley. I'm an attorney from Dedham, and I'm here tonight in place of Attorney Michael Schultz, who unfortunately was ill and could not make the meeting tonight. And I really want to be brief and more or less highlight a couple of the key points that he included in your letter. So you have the rest of that, you know, directly from his letter. But first, I wanted to address a couple of the points that Attorney Moynihan just raised, and in particular, you know, she sort of tried to frame this as kind of a challenge to 40B itself, and that's not, at least, what our, you know, the abutters feel. They understand that's the law in the books, and there's not a gathering opposition from their perspective, simply trying to challenge the law that is in place and that is before you. Instead, the real question that's before this body is really what are the reasonable recommendations and requests, and what kind of conditions are appropriate to apply to this to help mitigate the consequences that are in effect for the abutters. So that's really what I'd like to focus on here. She also questioned sort of the how genuine or real some of the opposition is with respect to questioning the addresses and the like. And there, I would just simply point to the room tonight. And you see the folks in person who are here. And, I was outside with the others trying to gather in more chairs. These people are real. They're here in town. And I think many of them, when they have an opportunity to speak, they'd be happy to tell you their address and explain how close they are and connected to the property. And finally, just one point about sort of the questioning the cost of the fencing that's being requested by the abutters. I'm not sure exactly where they're getting their estimates from, but it should not be costing $40,000 to $50,000 to pay for the kind of fence that the abutters are reasonably asking for. And maybe that's something that Attorney Schultz and Attorney Moynihan can continue to work on, maybe suggest a couple of other places to get bids. I don't know where that number is coming from, but it's it's higher than I think the market would actually require to build these things. So just directly to the points of really the request from both the abutters, and just to be clear, Attorney Schultz represents both William and Mary Jane Marston, as well as Joseph and Carol Bento. Those are the two property owners on either side of this parcel. And in particular, the primary request is that fencing. And at this point, they've really proposed a couple of specific alternatives that we think are more than reasonable in light of the impact of the project. And so, just to be clear, one of these two conditions is what we are requesting the board to impose in this case. The first alternative is that the developer shall install a 6-foot cedar stockade fence along the common boundary line of the Marstons and Bentos property from Locust Field Road to the easement area prior to phase 1 of the construction. And in addition, maintenance of the fence shall remain with the developer until it is assigned to the homeowners association. So that's one alternative. The other alternative that our clients would also accept is that the developer shall install an 8-foot stockade fence along the common boundary line of the Marstons property from Locust Field to the end of Lot 4, and Bento's property from Locust Field to the end of Lot 10, again, prior to phase 1 of construction. And then under the terms of the permit and at their sole cost and expense, the Marstons would be allowed to continue and complete the construction of the 8-foot fence from the end of Lot 4 to the easement area. And the Bentos shall be allowed to continue and complete the construction of the 8-foot fence from Lot 10 to the easement area. And again, maintenance shall remain with the developer until it's assigned to the homeowners association. And sort of just to quickly summarize that, the point is, we would propose a 6-foot fence down each of the property lines, or alternatively, an 8-foot fence for a shorter length, provided that each of the homeowners would be able to, on their own expense, extend that further. So, that's really the sort of the key element to highlight. And honestly, in light of the really significant intrusion and the disruption both to the Marstons and Bentos property as a result of this project, we really feel that this is the least the developer could do. So there are also a few other points that are included in the letter with respect to traffic. I already saw in your questioning, you were raising some of these same pieces with respect to lighting, traffic, water as well. We understand at this point that both the water department and the fire department have raised concerns with respect to the water pressure, which of course would be necessary to fight a fire in the event something significant were to happen in that area. This is a serious safety concern that we think ought to be addressed, and we hope that the board will heed the other town departments and the recommendations that they've put forth, both in the, from the water department and the fire department as well with respect to that. But for the other, the other points, I would just refer to the letter, and I appreciate you allowing me a couple extra minutes past 2 minutes, but happy to take any questions. I do hope that should the hearing be extended for another date, that Attorney Schultz, would be here and be able to respond in more depth to you all and your questions. But I'm happy to answer anything if you have questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
get some?
Jerry?
I guess I said it before. I think this, I wasn't sure if the fencing was needed at all, just from and I appreciate that you're proposing a 6-foot fence, but I think that's exactly what the developer's proposing.
In
Is it-
terms,
Is a 6-foot fence.
correct, in terms of height.
In
It's the
terms of
length
height.
that's the issue.
Okay. But, you know, I don't see the issue of trespassing of the children onto dangerous farmland as an issue. I think it's more of an issue of those animals trespassing onto, and I know people, and I talked to the neighbors about this, and, you know, they've been there, their horses are corralled, but it's a farm, so, you know,
Sure.
I'm not convinced that the hazard is as great as it would appear, especially with a 6-foot fence.
Well, I'm with you to some extent. So I think with a 6-foot fence running, you know, as far down the property line as possible, yes, that we would feel more confident about that. I think the issue is that the length of the fence as proposed right now does not run that, you know, sufficiently down the property line such that, you know, it'll be easy to circumvent, you know, around the back of that. It's just too small a coverage. And the other issue, of course, is the proximity, you know, between the two. This is I was just looking at it, you know, again this evening before popping over, and it's really astonishing how close this is being proposed to the property line, and you literally could, you know, toss a little, you know, tennis ball, wiffle ball, like just over the line, and you'd hit a horse. Like, I mean, it literally.
Say again?
Well, the point is, the horse corral is already properly on the property line, but it's literally 10 feet away from where this property is being marked off. And if we've got, you know, houses and children playing in the backyard, like right up again, this is a very tight proposed project in a very tight spot,
What law
literally
is
10
the-
feet away.
What law is being violated by the setback? I mean, I understand what you're saying, but you know the constraints of this board imposed by state law. It might be nice to have, but I heard no compelling argument, and I'll let Attorney Monahan address extending the fence. To me, it's up to them where they buy the materials. I don't think the board's gonna specify negotiations between, unless you guys are. I also noticed that the fire department just said they think a loop would be necessary. It didn't quite, the letter from the fire department didn't quite say it was a safety hazard. They said the hydrants are adequate. And yes, they would prefer a loop, as well as the water superintendent that said he would prefer a loop. But again, it's not mandated. So what authority do we have? Because if we put that in and we lose, it's a needless waste of time for you and the applicant.
I think 2 points to address. The first is, I do think that letter is indicating what the risk is and what the issue is. And I do believe you have within your power the opportunity to protect against that safety risk. And you
Thank
know,
you.
I see what you're raising. I would say I believe the board has the power to address both of these concerns. I see the risk, you know, the downside risk of that, but you know, that I think is not wasted time. Instead, what it is protecting the interests of a number, you know, clearly our two abutters, but other folks in the community who'd be impacted by those issues as well.
I guess that's how we read the letter.
Yeah.
No more questions.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you. Well, we'll turn it to public comment, sir.
This is my letter, with my address, by the way.
Thank you.
Live on Mayor's Pond Drive, just down the street. See if I can do this right now. On page 21 of the chapter
You could-
4.
Sir, if you could
I'm
please
James
state your
J.
name.
McGuire, I'm sorry, it's right
Thank
on
you.
my thing. I'm sorry about that. I live on Mayor's Pond Drive. environmental impact statement on page 21, chapter 4 of the handbook for 40B zoning appeals appeal hearing process. It says that for projects involving waivers of a local wetlands bylaw and/or a local wetlands conservancy district, a wetland scientist should be hired to review the application and its impact on the wetlands, vernal pools, groundwater, surface water quality, and to make recommendations to the zoning board, excuse me, in consultation with the Conservation Commission. Now, the Conservation Commission was not involved in this at all, is that correct? Does anybody know?
I don't believe they provided any comment.
Why? I went to a board today that's involved with the Water Quality Management Committee, and I sat and listened about oysters for 2 hours. But I did learn that they could not, they wouldn't be involved in this because they work mainly with wetland studies and all, you know, the
Right, well, with,
estuaries and whatever, but why wasn't conservation?
Are there any wetlands in the area, sir?
with regard to.
It does say groundwater and surface water. There's gonna be groundwater coming out of that thing. There's gonna be plenty of groundwater
Testimony
going down
was
that
the
hill.
groundwater does not impact the important,
It says here, it should
protection.
be considered, though.
okay, thank you.
Okay, I live on Mears Pond Drive, and in 1982, all our wells were contaminated by our septic systems. We had cross-contamination of the wells. They went into our wells were no good. I paid for town water for 10 years to correct that. Now, is the same thing gonna happen up here? Only it'll be different because you're already bringing town water in. Where is that water gonna go? You're 270 feet away from the pond down there at the closest. That's the measurement I have. You could check that, 200 feet, 200 feet.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, where's that water gonna go? No one has mentioned water here. Mentioned fences, you mentioned plantings and all of that. No one's mentioned water. What about the well that's in the middle of the town land on the side of Mayor's Pond? What about the plume coming down from the dump where they used to dump raw sewage in a big pit up there? That's headed here. Falmouth put out a booklet on,
Sir, you are
Here it
coming up,
is.
you are coming up against your time limit, is there? any-
well, let me, okay? Please?
Well, I'm just letting
Can
you
I
know.
beg? This, you can read it yourself, I'll give
Chairman?
it to you.
I
They're
think-
predicting a plume in 2040 will hit both Long Pond and Mayor's Pond. This was
Chairman?
put out by the town of Falmouth.
Mr. Chairman, I think he's giving information, questions that Attorney Monahan, I think, answered but could be responded to. I
She
don't
didn't
thi-
answer anything about water, sir.
We'll see. I don't think we should extend the time.
I don't know why you're so adamant about not letting me do my little thing about the water here. That's a
What-
cold water pond. I don't want to see that pond lost. I have every right to defend that pond over
And
there.
Ms. Monahan will explain it, and you could respond to
I
her.
don't think she can, because she talked to some, they haven't put a well down there. How can you put a well
We had a
down?
professional engineer dictate which
That-
way the groundwater's flowing.
Yeah, well, what's
The
gonna-
plume coming from
Sir,
Otis
I'm
is...
gonna.
You're gonna
have to-
kick me out? Because I can't have my say? I'm entitled to my say here,
And we limit,
because I feel fiercely about this.
and I understand your concern, sir, but we do limit public comment.
That
to two-
development hasn't even been put in. There should be a wells to see
Mr.
where
Chairman?
exactly the water's
I'm
going.
gonna have to ask you to please sit down, sir.
It's too bad. Too bad.
And
Brace.
thank you, sir. With regard to your comment about any possibility of Conservation Commission being involved with this project, typically with zoning board projects, we do send out referrals to town departments such as Conservation, Engineering, Board of Health, Planning, pretty much every other department you can imagine in the town. And it's up to them to come back and give us any sort of comment on that. With regard to 40B projects, there's typically a meeting, Noreen can tell us more about that, but typically there are meetings with department heads, like I said, such as Conservation Engineering, other heads of departments in town, And they typically sit down and review the 40B project prior to any sort of hearings that we may have. So that does touch upon some of your concerns that you stated.
And just to note that there are very detailed referrals from the engineering department in the file, so if anyone wants to review those. And even though you did sit down, your points are made in your letter, so we'll have that on file.
Could I see the letter?
Does anyone else wish to speak regarding this project? Ma'am?
My name is Judith McDowell. I'm a resident of Harriet Road. I've lived there for 42 years, and I've seen the progress that Mayor's Pond has been engaged in the town's water resource, drinking water supply over that time. Mayor's Pond currently provides 6.6% of Falmouth's drinking water, and the proposed development off Locust Field Road is in the recharge district for the Mayor's Pond Water Tower. The adjacent neighborhood on Harriet Road has 2-acre zoning with significant open space and conservation areas to protect Mayor's Pond. The same is true for the Spectacle Pond recharge area. I want to speak specifically to the request to grant a waiver for the 80,000 square feet in the Water Resource Protection District. For this project, for this request would be inconsistent with the conservation measures taken over the past 20 years to protect the water resources that serve Falmouth's drinking water supply. The requirement to set aside those 80,000 square feet can be met, and the development could move forward by just reducing the number of houses to be built on the property. I've attached maps of the Mayor's Pond Water Protection District and the Mayor's Pond and Spectacle Pond reservations. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. And if you want to submit that, please feel free.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So are you suggesting, Judy, that they should go to 80,000 square foot lots?
No, it's a set-aside area. It's not 80, I mean, that's would be a
What are
2-acre
you-
lot.
what-
There's an 80,000, they're requesting an 80,000 square foot waiver in the Water Protection District. And I'm saying they could meet, they don't need the waiver. They could go forward with the development, but just set aside that 80,000 square feet. It's part of the property.
So including the existing?
They have
Yeah.
176,000 square feet, and they're proposing to build on 89,000 square feet. They could build on 80,000 square feet and meet that requirement.
Okay, so you're
And they would be
basically
consistent with what has been done.
What you're asking for is 9,000 feet less in the developed area.
I'm saying, don't grant the waiver, adjust it wherever possible, but that would be consistent with what has been done in the Mayor's Pond and Spectacle Pond area over the past 20 years.
Anything else, Ken?
That's it.
That's it.
No-
Thank you.
No question.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members, for giving me an opportunity to speak. I'm here tonight to support my neighbors and also have concern for the town of Falmouth and its citizens. My name is Bill Overholtz. I live at 193 Percival Road, and I'm a neighbor. So I really have 2 points to make, and they're both about water quality. They're a little more in-depth than we've heard. So as you know, the town of Falmouth has installed sewers around the densely developed Little Pond estuary and is currently planning to sewer Great Pond. These projects are costing the town and its citizens millions of dollars. The Falmouth Water Quality Management Committee is currently managing and addressing nutrient loading for the rest of the town. The plan is to sewer or install remedial measures in other densely developed areas and not to have to sewer much of the rest of the town because it is less densely populated and developed. So this proposed 40B development with Title V septic systems is in direct conflict with the goals and objectives of the Falmouth Water Committee and also the goals of the town. This type of dense development and the rest of town will no doubt require remedial measures totaling millions of additional dollars in the future and will further negate efforts to manage nutrients that are polluting our bays, estuaries, and freshwater ponds. Second point, just a paragraph, if you'll let me finish. In addition, this dense 40B Locust Field project is in the Long Pond watershed. With Title V septic systems and the soil types in this area, nitrogen, phosphorus, and many other household inputs will flow directly into Long Pond. The town has just finished a multi-million-dollar water treatment plan in Long Pond. It's not clear that the town of Falmouth has planned carefully for dense development in that area. We all have seen the media articles about toxic and harmful algal blooms in Lake Erie, Lake Champlain, and in many of our local freshwater ponds and lakes. The new water treatment plant is not designed to deal with high nutrient loading and certainly cannot handle toxic algal blooms. Should we keep packing dense developments into the Long Pond watershed when we know what the likely outcome will be? Finally, I just leave with a question. How will the Locust Field LLC developer address these water quality issues? Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members.
I have a question.
Sure.
I know what the goals of the Water Quality Management Committee is. I know of no requirement to require advanced or enhanced nitrogen removal in that area. Absolutely none. The Board of Health has no requirement. To the extent that this needs enhanced nitrogen in the future because of a detailed study, that will be addressed by the town as an upgrade to all septic tanks. I was just trying to answer some of your concerns.
Thanks for your comment, but this is precisely the point I'm making. They're not planning to have to do that. But let's face it, we know what happens when you put dense development in. That's why we had to sewer Little Pond, and we're going
I
to sewer
understand. Thank you,
Great
sir.
Pond and the rest of the town.
Anything
So,
further, Jen?
No, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
sure.
Attorney Moynihan, I think we'll just cover some more public comment.
Maybe I could satisfy some of the water quality issues.
Thank you. And going forward, I think with the past 3 public comments, we've heard serious enough questions about the water quality. Does anyone have any other concerns regarding this project? Miss?
Sure. Could I?
Of course, you can submit it.
I'm sorry. I should have done that when I was there.
Sorry. Over here.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Karen Bissonette, 7 Coleridge Drive in Falmouth. I'm also the Executive Director of the Falmouth Housing Trust. I'm here to speak about affordable housing, or the lack thereof, in our community. As many of you may know, we have a crisis of affordable housing, and I'm concerned about the sustainability of our community because our young people can't afford to live here. I've said this before. People have heard me say that I don't want to live in a community that everyone's 60 and older, and I think that is where we're heading. I've lived here since I was a little girl, and I'm afraid there won't be many little girls left in Falmouth if we don't provide affordable housing for our community. I understand the issues that are brought up here today, but I also feel that this is a bigger issue, and I don't know if some of you were able to read the editorial that was in the Cape Cod Times a week and a half ago. It was called Recreate a Sense of Community, and it talked about the droves and droves of young people that are leaving the Cape, and it is because of the cost of living here. So I would say please support this project, because I think that in the long run, if we have nobody to live here and no one to do the jobs that our young people get employed, ask employers. There are very, very few employers that won't tell you that they have a really hard time finding people. So we're talking about first responders and teachers and bank tellers and people who work in town hall and people who service at restaurants. And I really think that all of us need to be really concerned with the affordable housing issue on the Cape. So I would support Mr. McClone's project. It brings 3 more affordable homes, and that means 3 more families that can stay here, work here, and contribute to the vitality of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
Mr. Chairman, just to make a note, that article is in the file, but there is a comment here from Conservation on February 8th that they didn't believe that there were any conservation issues with the project.
Thank you, Bob.
Mr. Chairman, fellow board members, my name is Michael Duffany. I live at 59 Patty Road. So I am a neighbor of them. I hope I put my address on the form that I filled out as well. I just want to discuss a little bit the procedural piece of this, because I am also a proponent of affordable workforce housing in the town of Falmouth. I put my money where my mouth is. I've worked on 3 previous habitat projects on the Cape and on several projects here in town. So it's not that piece that, I think that we all feel that strongly that we need workforce housing. I have folks that work for me that need it as well. So I want to just address the piece that is the role of the legislation, if you will, that's been promulgated at the state, that says that these projects can't be just indiscriminately placed. There has to be some real rhyme and reason for where they go, and they need to make sense where they go, and they need to be for the public benefit, if you will, not just for the development of the project. So with that, I would offer that this is off of a winding road, which you already know, which there are no sidewalks on. There's no public transportation. I have a problem with the siting of the project, and I've worked on several that I have to question, in hindsight, why they were allowed where they were, but there were none then. So now we've gotten to the point where we have some. They're coming at us fairly frequently. There are a lot of other uses that could be allowed on this property. Yes, there are, but they would also have to come before you for that. They're not by right uses to do some of the things that we heard that are allowed. So I would urge caution in the density piece of this here, in the siting of this particular project on this very small piece of property in an area that has done nothing since I've been there since 1978, has done nothing but the lot's getting larger and larger and larger to address some of the issues that you've heard, which are that we are north of Long Pond, and all studies that we've seen show that during summer months when it's dry and we're drawing 5 million gallons a day out of Long Pond, that there are studies from the USGS that say that the plume from the dump is heading into Long Pond. So it cautions us about what we draw. And then everything in that area in low water seasons goes directly, all the arrows go right to Long Pond. So there is a previous gentleman's point was well taken, that that there should be a concern. But the precedent that you could be setting here, by approval of this here, is something going forward. It's going to make it more difficult, to disagree, if you will, with poor siting of other projects. And I just think that I would urge you to consider that. I don't think this is the right place for that. It doesn't have the support infrastructure that it needs. That all, the new zoning, the form-based zoning and so forth, is all in the downtown, the densities in the downtown areas where it belongs, where the infrastructure is, where there is transportation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Duffy. Anyone else care to comment? Sorry. Ma'am?
Hi everyone, I'm Jessica O'Brien. I live at 6 Eli Lane in East Falmouth. I'd like to add on that I rent that property. I know that you're all gonna hate me after I say this, but I am in favor of this project because of the 3 affordable housing units that are gonna be going in. Like Laura said before, 10% is I think the minimum for affordable housing, and we're only at about 6%, and we've got a lot of work to do ahead, and this is just going to contribute to that. So that is all. Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
This lady was waiting.
I didn't see her, Jerry, sorry. We'll get to you next, ma'am.
Hello, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Joel Lubin. I live at 36 Patee Road in East Falmouth, so I am pretty close to being in a butter. And my wife and I have written a letter, but a lot of the points that are on here have already been covered, so I don't waste your time with it. But the one piece I do want to emphasize really has to do with the traffic situation. So we've owned our property for 11 years, and I have to say in the last couple of years, we have just really noted the vast increase of traffic where Patee Road hits Locust Field Road, where Locust Field Road hits Brick Kiln, in the intersection of Trotting Pond Park. Sometimes it takes an awfully long time just to get out. Now part of that is because the high school is just down the street, so that's what the Brick Hill road traffic can be. But to add another 12 units, 3 bedrooms, and probably a couple of cars, I have a lot of concerns about the safety. And if this project does go through, I don't think this is the developer's issue, but I would hope that the town would look at the traffic and consider stop signs, traffic lights, whatever, because as it is right now, it's really quite dangerous, and it's only going to get worse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask you, are there any specific places where you feel stop sign is warranted?
Possibly at the end of Locust Field and at the end of Trotting Pond Park. Also, just that, if you go up Mares Pond Road and it tees into Locust Field, I know that Attorney Moynihan suggested that the speed limit is 25. I can tell you that people come around that bend much more quickly than that. So even maybe putting some police officers there periodically, I don't know, but it's very dangerous right now. So I have a lot of concerns about adding a great deal of traffic. That's all. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anything else?
Ma'am?
My name's Joanne Brian Gardner. I live at 456 Locust Field Road. I had a comment at the board's March meeting. We became clear on the fact that the back acre of this property in question, rather than being deliberately left undeveloped, is in fact not able to be developed because it runs under the power lines. Ms. Moynihan referred to this space as green space and open space. In reality, this is just an easement. There was some talk, I think, from members of the board about whether the space could be used for the community, even perhaps community gardening. I would like to comment that the land on the power lines is sprayed with herbicides on a regular basis by Eversource. In the 4 years that we've lived in the area, we've gotten at least 2 notices from Eversource about spraying. It seems to be up to the company how often and how much they spray. Homeowners really have no say in it. Since this development is being touted as housing possibly for families, I'm thinking it might be a real concern for parents that the only open space provided in this development is under electrical power lines that are routinely sprayed with herbicides. So my question is, hopefully will it be disclosed to prospective homeowners that this open space at the back of the development is routinely sprayed by Eversource, because it happens indiscriminately. It's not a regular thing that you can plan for. I'd like to.
Sure. Anyone else? No, sir? Okay. Sir? Oh, I'm sorry, I recognize the man in the back there.
Will you waive your time?
When you said you thought you were just standing up, I thought you were getting up to stretch. My apologies.
I was trying to be cute. Hello, and thank you for your time. I'm Tom Campbell. My wife, Debbie Orbach, and I live at 474 Locust Field, and oddly enough, I'll be speaking in opposition to the project. My thanks to the board for serving. I suspect these meetings are rarely fun. On reading the file in Town Hall, it looks like the developer has requested at least 4 waivers. 305-24A, the grade of the road is greater than 2%. 305-34, streetlights required at the end of a 500-foot road. 305-24D, a cul-de-sac required at the end of a 500-foot road. And 305-40, trees planted on either side of the road less than 40 feet apart. I'd have to believe the developer's last two requests are driven by there not being enough land to implement the normal requirements. This is a major indication the project is too dense for the neighborhood. The last waiver to not plant trees I find particularly ironic. This is a heavily wooded neighborhood where many of the neighbors, including ourselves, purchased their homes because they were surrounded by trees. The developer's going to clear cut some 3 acres and balks at planting a row of trees 40 feet apart on either side of the road because there's no space available. Ms. Monahan has elegantly argued in multiple letters on file that the project decision is up to you, the Zoning Board of Appeals. The developer doesn't have to answer to the normal town boards, fire, health, conservation, et cetera. So be it. You, the board, are kind of our last lines of defense, short of both sides spending an inordinate amount of money in court. You've heard many arguments tonight about the project's safety, environmental, surrounding property value issues. I think those meet the legal requirement for rejection, but perhaps more important in the real world, the project is simply too dense for the neighborhood and will change it forever. Please do the right thing. Reject these waivers, reject the project. Thank you, and I'd like to submit this for the record.
Thank you, sir, and you can do that. Sir, blue coat, sorry about that.
So the planning board could wake up.
My name's Raymond Burke. I'm at 404 Locust Field Road. My parents and I both own lots 5 and 6 of that 30-acre parcel. We bought this land to enjoy its privacy, ample vegetation, and to continue our long history of farming Cape area land where past generations farmed for survival. And I'll make this short because a bunch of the other stuff's been talked about, but farming can produce incidental noises, odors, dust, fumes, and I'm concerned that our right to farm would be in jeopardy if this development is permitted in the middle of this agricultural parcel. So I would like to ask the board, will you ever deny the agricultural property owners of Locust Field Road the right to farm on our properties? Yes or no?
On what grounds would we do that?
I think it's a legal question. I have no idea. There's right to farm, you got farming.
It's zoned agricultural?
Right, but you're putting, now you want to put 12 houses.
Yeah, but you were there first.
And it was a farm.
They knew what they were doing when they bought.
It's like moving next to an airport and complaining about the noise. No, I don't mean necessarily to be argumentative, but trying to, you asked a question, I don't know of any issues of denying your right to farm in the future.
I'll treat the question like a lawyer, and I'll say that it is agriculturally zoned space, and I believe Falmouth is a right to farm community. But that's as much as I'll say.
May I submit this?
Of course you can. So, anyone else wish to speak tonight? Ma'am?
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Debbie Hewins. I live at 485 Locustfield Road. I am not a total abutter, but I live down the street, and as you know, the street is very busy. I also started the Neighborhood Watch in this neighborhood because of safety issues. So that's why I'm talking to you today. I feel that all of the safety issues with the fence has not been addressed, and I really do believe that a full fence is needed. No one from the 40B should be able to walk or get onto Mr. Marston's or Mr. Bento's property. It is a shame that they have to worry about youngsters trying to be curious and excited, as you know they're going to be, And they're gonna wanna go over and pet the horse or the cow or see the chickens or the ducks or whatever else they put on their farm. I know this will happen, and so do you. They could fall, trip, or hurt themselves in any number of ways. It is not fair for my neighbors to be tied up worrying about what is going to happen, or how, or when, or where. This is very important to consider. My second safety reason for this is the S-curves. The whole street is S-curves. My house begins on the double S-curve, and the 40B ends on the double S-curve. It is windy, hilly. People use this as a cut-through to the dump, so there are trucks, trailers, and all kinds of things. And I know you've heard this probably several times, but it is enough. Also, it is so hard to watch out for them when you're on the street. I walk the street all the time. I know most of my neighbors by name, or at least by their faces. I know who belongs there. I know who doesn't belong there. And it's very fast. And I know she said it was 25 miles an hour, but it's never 25 miles an hour there. You said that there are 25 houses, there are 24 cars, so that's adding to that too, but that's neither here nor there. There are no sidewalks on any of the street, and it would be really nice if there were, but you can't decide that. The density doesn't make sense at all, and I hope you will consider this before you vote. Thank you, and I would like to submit this for the record.
Thank you, ma'am, and of course you can.
I have a question.
Oh, thank you.
What do you mean by you know which people should not be there?
Sometimes there are strangers in a neighborhood that walk and case a neighborhood. Our whole neighborhood was affected, and there were like only 4 houses on Harriet Road on the side behind me that were not broken into
Okay,
a
theft.
few years ago.
Theft.
And things like
Thank you.
that. So all of us put in alarm systems at one point.
Or ring doorbells?
Well, you know what I mean. Thank you.
Thank you. There was a hand up in the back at the last call.
My name is Laura Katanek. I live on Wampum Road, 15 Wampum Road. And I'm concerned that this development is not in character with the neighborhood. The neighborhood it's an agricultural zoning. Our street, Wampum, is the densest street in the area. We have 9 houses on just almost 4 acres. And we are non-conforming, denser. I'm not opposed to affordable housing. I would love to see more affordable housing. I'd be a lot happier about this if it were a smaller number of duplexes that would have less visual impact. I'm also concerned that the market rate houses won't sell. Houses with significantly more lot space, like there's a half-acre house on Wampum that recently sold after a year and a half on the market for under $300,000. And they're expecting to sell these houses on a lot that's smaller than 1/4 of an acre for over $400,000. I'm not sure it's gonna happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am?
Hello. My name is Dina Souza, and I live at 23 Wampum Road. Laura's a neighbor of mine. And I know this has been talked about already, but I just want to bring safety again into this issue. I'm really pro affordable housing. I don't think this is the right neighborhood to have 12 houses built in it. I'm concerned about the fact, again, that we have no sidewalks, that walking on, and I walk because I have 2 dogs, so I walk them in the neighborhood. And there've been a couple of times when I've had to pull my dogs back so that we don't get hit by a car. And I'm concerned about 12 homes, being built on Locust Field with, again, who knows the number of cars, and also the kids. I feel like it's gonna put the kids in danger if they come into the road when people are driving really fast. I'm very concerned about the safety. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir?
Name is Joe LeMay, live on Meredith Drive. I'm not in a butter. I come to speak about one of the charities I work for. It's the St. Vincent de Paul Society. There are 3 St. Vincent de Paul Societies working in Falmouth, and we help the people who fall down, hit a financial speed bump, try to keep them in their homes. We have, my St. Vincent de Paul covers East Falmouth. We have 10 advocate pairs. Each pair usually works about 2.5 days a week at the phone. You gather all the clients during those 2.5 days, and then you settle them over the next month. I'm in my 2.5 days now. By tomorrow, I will have been in 3 houses that have more than 10 adults living together. That's the only way they can afford the rent, is to bulk up, pile in. I heard somebody say, care for the people of Falmouth. I care for the people of Falmouth. I want these people to find places to live, some space. The worst house I've been in recently was a 9-room house, including the kitchen, not counting the bathrooms. There were 8 people living there, 1 in each room, sharing the kitchen and the bathrooms. And they each paid $360 a month for this living arrangement. Karen Bissonette was up earlier. She used the word crisis. I've never used the word crisis before, but I think that might capture some of the urgency of getting affordable housing in this town. We could build 2,000 units based on the information I have in my files at St. Vincent de Paul. We have about 2,000 people who are living in these overcrowded conditions in Falmouth, in just East Falmouth. I don't know what's going on with the other 2 St. Vincent de Pauls. We're all separate organizations. So if we built 2,000 affordable units in the next year, they'd be full if these houses, disperse their people into those things. So all these different places where we want to build affordable housing around Falmouth, they're all desperately needed, every one of them. We have ecological crises in the town. We have all kinds of things. We have a human crisis here. And I would really like to see every affordable unit we can get built as soon as possible, and maybe my clients won't be my clients anymore.
Thank you, sir. All right, is there someone in the back there? Oh,
There's at least 3 more.
Mr. Enos?
Yeah. I was told I could show a little flash drive on here. Do you know anything about that?
We do have the capability.
You do?
We do.
Alrighty.
How many slides?
Be much appreciated.
That's just about as much as I can opine about the issue.
I was hoping somebody could take the reins.
Do we have the other person speak while they're setting it
Yeah,
up?
maybe we could.
Mr. Enos, would you be amenable if someone else could provide a comment while they try to work that?
No problem.
Is there someone in the back there, sir?
Excuse me, Sean Cornell, 498 Locust Field. Again, back to the safety issue. It has been a big issue ever since Adam and I were little kids riding our bikes on the street. We were perfectly fine, but I've noticed it as an adult, walking my dog. The traffic speed has definitely increased, is my point. I'm disabled, veteran. I have hearing loss in my right ear, and I noticed that when I got my hearing aid a month ago, it made a difference. I could hear the traffic coming, but if I don't have my hearing aid in, the dog is startled when that car gets up to where we are walking. So the traffic has definitely been an issue. People have made notations about the sidewalks. We don't have sidewalks. There's not enough room on Locust Field to make sidewalks, not even one, in my opinion. Again, I'm not an engineer, but when we were kids, we could ride our bikes up and down the street, and affordable housing is great. I'm all for it, but in the right place. It's got to be in the right place. I don't feel that Locust Field and that this plan fits for the area, and
Between the high school traffic.
the high school traffic alone has been an issue.
I mean, they're doing
you know.
60, 70 miles an hour down the street, easy some days, easy.
Definitely agree with that.
They're racing
I've
down
had
the
to pull kids over on my own street.
They're passing
And I
each
tell
other.
them that it's an issue. Thank you.
Thank
for your
you.
time. Go ahead, Ed.
While we're waiting real quick, this was dropped on my lap as I came in. Quick thing about the water. Water Resource Protection District, and it has a circle around this whole area, which happens to be, with this project, dead square in the middle of it here. And this paperwork here says, is to promote the health and safety of general welfare of the community by ensuring adequate quality and quantity of drinking water. And the residential uses shall have the following density limitations: minimum lot size 80,000 square feet, minimum lot width 200 feet, minimum lot frontage 150 feet, maximum lot coverage by impervious surfaces 20%. Now, that project, I don't think is meeting any of that criteria. I haven't done a lot of research, like I said, it got dropped on my lap as I came in, but, you know, this was amended from 1979 to 1994 8 times until we finally got the law passed that that area needed to be taken under advisement, and now we're just gonna put 12 homes in the middle of it. It's kind of totally going against the whole reason of why this law was passed to begin with. The US region. I'm not a computer genius myself.
Mr. Chairman, can you ask him to say who he is?
I'm sorry?
I don't know his name.
Adam Enos.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, if you know. Oh, scan disk secure access, the bottom one. That one right there, I remember seeing that, yeah. There it is, the QuickTime movie. How do you wanna play it? Oh, there we go. Just enlarge that maybe. So this is aerial drone footage of the whole entire neighborhood. Of course, this thing's cranking right along here. This is starting right in front of the project, basically, and this is going down Harriet Road, the backside of the neighborhood. And as you can see, each home has, you know, a decent lot surrounded by trees. Everybody has their own privacy, spaciousness, not gathered on top of everybody. This is the backside. Oh, there we go. Good man. This is Capricorn Circle, a cul-de-sac. You know, probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 homes on it, on much greater land than the proposed project. This is another cul-de-sac at the end. Everybody's, you know, got their own space. And then as we continue down Locust Field, you know, there's 15 homes on one side of Locust Field from end to end, almost a mile long. And now this project is, you know, 2.6 acres of actual land that the homes will be on, somewhere around there. And you're talking about 12 homes. That's almost the whole length of the whole road on one side. This is the good part. So right here is Mr. Bento's home and Mr. Marston's home over here.
There's a car going 25 miles an hour.
Yeah, he's cruising. He's cruising.
One of the few.
So, in this picture here, first home is gonna be positioned right here like this, according to the stake layout in the land. Now, the back deck is about right here, which is probably 15 feet away from his home, the side of his home. The other first home on the lot is on this side, right here, next to Mr. Marston's house. So, and the next home is right here, and the next home is right here, like this. So they're literally when they stand on their back deck, they're staring into Mr. This is another home right here, and the back deck comes right about right here, almost. I mean, Mr. Marston could ride by on his horse and slap hands with the new neighbors on their deck. It's so close, you know what I mean? So, this comes into play that, I have all this written out, I should read it probably, but.
How you doing? Good.
You guys can take a peek. This is the easement area of, non-access, non-building, all that. Oh, this is part two. So at the widest part of this whole property, as you can see, not pretty good, this is Bill Marston's property line right here. He has a road that he took all the way to the power lines. And Mr. Bento has one right here as well that goes all the way right along his property line. It's all staked off and everything. So between here and here, you're gonna put a T and then 7 houses down this side and 5 over here. I mean, I honestly, I can't grasp the fact that Mr. Bento has 2 Shelter Logic sheds out back, and the stake says corner of unit, and it is literally 5 feet away from 2 portable Shelter Logic garages. So as you stand on the deck, on the back of this $450,000 home, you get to stare at the back of a garage 5 feet away off the deck, literally 5 feet. I mean, I don't understand how they can say there's a buffer zone or tree zone. Every tree you see there is gone. There's no doubt about it. There's no.
What lot was that? Excuse me.
What's that?
What lot is 5 feet away from the property?
That would be unit on the side that has 5 units.
I believe that would be unit 2.
2, like the third one back, I think.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So.
We know which unit.
You know what I mean? So what it comes down to is it fair to these neighbors who bought these homes, pretty much to live out their days in peace, quiet, agricultural? When you shut the lights off at nighttime, it's dead darkness out there, quiet, peaceful. Every house is gonna sound like, any noise anyone makes in 12 homes is gonna sound like it's in your backyard. The lights, they're talking about, street lights out front. Every house is gonna have a backlight on their back deck, which is pointed, 3 houses on one side, 3 on the other are directly pointed at Mr. Bento, Mr. Marston's homes. So they're gonna be looking at lights all night long. Every car that pulls into the development, as they pull in this way, or as they pull in this way to the development from the main road, headlights are directly in his front window and directly in his front window. And this is placing a hardship on these people. You know what I mean? They're trying to live their life out, and now you're changing their whole way of life. As Mr. Marston rides his horse around, the dust cloud, I mean, it rivals sandstorms sometimes through the wind. And now it's going right through everyone's windows, doors, the smell of horse manure all day long. I mean, I don't know how fair it is to buy a home for $450,000 and then have to deal with this. So now you're starting a feud almost between neighbors and new residents, so they're getting off to a bad start before we even get started here. Yeah, so.
I just put my lights on.
Yeah, I like to submit this here.
Yep, submit it to the
Certainly
clerk.
can. All right, at this point in the evening, we have. Sure, we'll do one more.
Members of the board, my name's Edwin Zielinski. I live in East Falmouth. As you know, I've been pretty outspoken about the agricultural impact. And I had a prepared statement, but I think through the chair, I'd like to congratulate all the people that came here. I think that they conducted themselves very well. I have a question to the board and to the town. Now, we've heard all these calculations about 40B and this and that. My issue is, out of 275 acres thus far used for 40B, 200 of those acres have been agricultural. So, here's my question. If we continue to let these builders overpopulate these agricultural lots with only 25% affordable, how do we ever catch the 10% that we're chasing?
So are we willing, as a town, to trade off a natural resource, which is agricultural property, for a goal that we can never achieve? So it's going to take people like you to do bold things and help set legislation to correct the inadequacies of these projects. All of you know that at 25%, we're never going to catch the 10%, so it's going to keep going down and down and down. We're chasing the bigger number. So what do? If I was on the board, I'd vote against it, because you know what? Then they'd have to appeal it. And then a judge would have to look at it and weigh it out. You cannot change these things that are out of everybody's hands. You know, it comes before the board and they say, well, the planning board sent it through. You know why? Because it's a hot rock. They didn't have to. I had a selectman walk up to me and say, Z, I know you're mad about this, but what can we do? You guys are the ones. You're a quasi-judicial board, and all these people practice due process tonight. Now it's your turn to listen to the people who elected the people that appointed you. It's a tough decision, but it's one that has to be made. You all know that there's a problem with these issues, and it's nothing personal. We'll never catch that 10%. And through the chair, I'd like to applaud everybody for being here.
Mr. Chair, before the hours is running late, I don't know if a continuation is in order. In order, because we haven't heard the Woods Hole project yet, and then what are they gonna have, 15 minutes?
So it's, in all likelihood, it does look like we'll be continuing this project. Attorney Moynihan will allow you time to respond to public comments.
Time certain.
Just a few things. In response to your question about the treatment plant, my client reminded me that Mr. Borselli had calculated the gallons per day at far less than what would normally be required for the gallonage for a treatment plant, so it wouldn't be required by regulation. The fencing, the cost estimate is $35 a linear foot. We can extend the fencing further between lots 10 and 11 and lots 2 and 3. I think that's what was originally proposed. We thought with the vegetative buffer that maybe that wasn't needed, but we could certainly do that. So that's between 10 and 11 and 2 and 3. We do have an affordable housing action plan in place, and that really addresses some of these comments. So Mr. Zelinski says we'll never reach our 10% goal. If you read the Affordable Housing Action Plan, it estimates that we'll be at 8% with the projects that have been approved, that are in the works, and it even includes this project. And that's 8%. So we are gonna reach the goal. That's a 5-year plan. But we have to follow that plan to reach the goal. So it's not that negative of a situation. Following the plan means approving cluster developments, which is recommended. They want higher density than this. That's what's being recommended. The placement of the project is in accordance with the plan. And from what Mr. Duffany said, the project siting is inappropriate. Read the plan. It's not inappropriate. The biggest issue on the water quality, the map that the lady filed, and I apologize, I forget her name, I think you referred to her as Judy. That's an outdated map. It's showing the water resource protection districts, which we know are there. But you have in your file, and I urge you to read it, the engineer's evidence with the DEP zones of contribution locations. He opines and gives you the testimony that this project site is not a contributing site to either Long Pond or Mares Pond. That map also does not take into account that town meeting has been moving, on recommendations from the planning board, has been moving towards amending the water resource protection district zones to bring them into conformance with the DEP Zone 2s. They did that for the Ashumet well site and I believe for the Coonamessett well site. So I urge you to read Mr. Borselli's letter, which specifically gives you that expert evidence that we are not contributing groundwater to Maris Pond. If the flow is not in that direction, the project site is outside any zone of contribution to Maris Pond or Long Pond. The water quality issue is not an issue. Okay, so the speculative evidence that you've received and the outdated map, you have to read the expert evidence that's in the file. You can condition the comprehensive permit so that there is no backdoor lighting, if that's a concern of the neighbors. We understand the proximity of the neighboring properties. The board can make its own determination on fencing. You have that right. We've given you a proposal. The board can look at that and what you feel is appropriate there. You understand the cost issue. You know, I think that that's something that can be done. Nurseries and childcare centers are allowed by right in this district. And the developer has had to answer to town boards and committees. We've been at this for a year. We were at the Board of Selectmen. And again, if there's a issue with Locust Field Road, people laugh when I say the speed is posted at 25 miles per hour. Well, the remedy is to call the police, to call the DPW, to look at sidewalks, to have somebody out there. That's the right, okay? That is the right of the neighborhood, like any neighborhood. So we can't take that evidence and say it's unsafe because people are not complying with the law. If it was a 50-mile-an-hour zone, I think it would be a different story, but it's not. This neighborhood will be self-contained. The residents here will be able to walk through their own neighborhood. There's a bus stop proposed for children. So I'm not trying to diminish what people have said is happening on Locust Field Road, but I'm saying that there are answers to that. And that's not a reason to not permit this affordable housing project. So I don't feel that a continuance is necessary. We don't have any additional information. We have, I think, gone above and beyond to address every single possible matter that's been raised tonight. And I think the board has sufficient information, in my opinion, and I'd like to request that you close the hearing.
Thank you, Attorney Moynihan.
Can I ask one question? I just have one question. Since this is a LIP application and the selectmen were in support, was there ever a consideration from doing an entrance from Gifford Street instead, with them giving the easement to enter that way? The actual into the development, so you wouldn't be exiting onto Locust Field?
No, it was never thought to be necessary. I mean, again, as a trip generator, you know, I'll give you the ITE rates. It's
No, I just
one
think, well,
trip,
Gifford
12
Street
trips in
has
the peak
sidewalks, and there is improvements over there, and there's you know, speed issues, so.
So when it went through the selectmen review, and it went through the review before it got to you, the engineering department looked at these issues, went out, were at the site, the people from DHCD were at the site. I mean, there has been a lot of site review. So the engineering department asked for site distances to be looked at. Normally, they might look at, you know, clearing of brush, or they might get involved and say, you want to do X, Y, and Z. None of that came about. And that's, again, because there's a legal requirement for a safety zone in that neighborhood that isn't being complied with. But the way you have it complied with is through neighborhood action, quite frankly. Keep calling the police, get people out there, get it regulated. You know, we've got regulation of theft in the area, we've got regulation of everything else. Why aren't we regulating that? It's not a reason to adversely affect this project. When it can be rectified.
Mr. Chair? I really think we should vote on consideration for continuation. We have another applicant coming in. I don't know what our time limits are, and it would take us at least half hour to go through and draft positive.
We're not gonna do, we're not gonna do a 40B tonight. We're not gonna vote on it.
Just close on it and write the conditions.
Well, I'm not even advocating that, but.
So can I just be heard maybe just on the question of continuance? I know everybody's anxious to move on, but again, I'm Mark Riley representing the abutters tonight. I'm literally just standing in tonight. Attorney Schultz was unable to make it today because he's fighting illness. I would just recommend to the board, in light of how important it is to protect the abutters' interests as well as the neighbors' interests, pick a short date. You know, he's just sick today. I think he'll be healthy and back at it soon. But, so I would request that. It's short. I understand the developer's interest, but to protect the abutter's interest, that's what we'd ask for.
Could he submit a letter by Monday? Well,
Well, there've also been new arguments raised today.
could he submit a response by Monday?
I don't know that without speaking to him.
Okay, thank you.
So I think more time would make sense.
Right. Well,
Can I say one quick thing?
no,
Just 1 second.
No.
Traffic
I'm
thing.
sorry,
Just
yeah.
a traffic study, because
thank you.
I guarantee you, one day with cops down there, you'll get
So-
10 high school kids doing 60 plus. About $100.
If that's a concern, to close it, except for written comment. I mean, that might be an option.
Excuse me. I believe Ken has a question for you.
I
Attorney
have
Moynihan.
two questions for you. One, so we heard some testimony tonight from the people in the neighborhood that they felt that the pricing was not realistic on the market rates. And what we don't want to do is approve something that's going to fail. Is there any response to that?
Well, you have to look at the budget. The developer has been very careful of that fact, because, and it will be monitored through DHCD. DHCD has also reviewed the budget. So in terms of the project failing, you know, the pricing of the market rate homes, there's enough profit in there for the developer,
Are they
for
gonna
him
sell?
to go forward. We believe they will. You know,
What
we-
happens if? in
Hey,
the-
Jerry,
Oh,
I'm
they
asking
go
questions.
bankrupt. It's
I'm
supporting you.
asking- I
Okay.
understand, but I'm
Okay.
speaking.
The reason that the developer went forward with this, one of the main reasons of going forward with this project and building this style of home at this market rate price point was because of what he perceived as somebody working in the community with many, many people saying that they wanted to buy one of these market rate homes. It's a price point that is achievable for a lot of people who are above the 80% median income.
That's what I'm really asking. Is
Right.
there a marketing study that you can submit that shows that?
No, just from research
So
and
that was
talking to
just-
real
I was
estate brokers
Just
and,
asking if you have anything more concrete.
but, but
Okay,
it,
the
but,
second question I wanted to ask you, you said Mr. Borselli's expert testimony is that the zones of contribution maps that were presented tonight are not accurate anymore. Is he basing this on USGS studies, or what's it based on?
no, that, just to clarify, what I said was that the map that was presented tonight is a map of the water resource protection districts in the town of Falmouth. If you look at it, the zones are matching the water resource protection districts. They're not the DEP state designated zones of contribution, which it says at the top, DEP zones. They're not.
So you're
The
not in
map is-
violation of any state regulations?
Or local regulations, because the zone of contribution is as designated by the DEP on the DEP map that's in your file. So the map that the woman filed tonight is a map of the water resource protection districts in the town. We know this property's in a water resource protection district. Many properties are in water resource protection districts, and like the board has done in the past, when approving affordable housing in a water resource protection district, you look to the DEP state designated zones of contribution where the contribution areas to Long Pond and Mares Pond have been studied, and area boundaries have been set where it is presumed, if you're within those area boundaries, that you could have an impact on those ponds from your septic treatment. This site is outside either one of those designated areas, just like the Gifford Street site was recently approved, and that's how that evidence works. So I'm not saying that was Mr. Borselli's testimony, I'm saying that the map is showing water resource protection districts. I think the Coonamessett one has since changed. But in any event, it's important for the board to keep in mind that this, we've been at this now for a year in the town of Falmouth. We filed this application in February. If, you know, closing the hearing and having more public testimony, I guess you have to decide if that's something that's going to assist you, or close the hearing for written comment, which is fine. Mr. Schultz can submit any follow-up comments, Any of the abutters can submit follow-up comments. My point is that we've been at this for 2 hours. The longer this hearing goes on and it's not closed, the more this project's in jeopardy. Costs are going up, interest rates are all over the place. That's a factor for anybody building affordable housing. You want to try and get through the process. The state says 30 days for a hearing, and you try and get a decision issued in 40 days. So we're not we know the board is busy, and we know you have a very difficult schedule, but keeping this open for another wide-open public hearing, I don't think that's necessary. And I think if people want to submit written comment, then you can consider it. But I would ask that you close the hearing.
Thank you, Attorney Moynihan.
Just point of clarification, the board has 180 days.
For a 40B.
Yes, not 30.
Thank you.
Thank you, Noreen.
Do we have some discussion?
I think we should, I do agree with Jerry, we gotta move on tonight.
Yeah, we do.
There's more business tonight. So I would be happy to propose that we continue this. Personally, I'm not prepared to close the hearing yet. This is a very significant project, it's affecting a lot of people, and I don't wanna be, forced to prematurely, rush to a decision on it, so.
Ken, I pretty much agree with you. We received some information today. Obviously, there was a lot of testimony tonight, and we did receive some information earlier this week. I know that we're a working board. A lot of us have full-time jobs, and given the amount of
Even more than
information.
full-time.
Right, given the amount of information we received, I do think that we need time. Keep the hearing open and continue it to another day.
So I will move that. And what does Noreen think's the appropriate date? It's making a face.
I lost my schedule.
May 23rd would be preferable because your other hearing for tonight, Woods Hole, is requested May 2.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you would be able to.
Nothing between May 23rd and May 2.
Would the board want to reconsider allowing written comments? They take a chance because they can't rebut it. We take, I mean, we've heard substantial
Jerry,
arguments.
I'm making this motion, you can vote against it.
Well, I said, can't we discuss it before we vote on it?
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do.
But I just want to find out the date right now, so we're talking May
May
23rd. Okay, so I will move that we
23rd.
continue to May 23rd here in Town Hall at 6:30.
Second.
Okay, motion was made by
Okay,
Ken.
now if Jerry wants to talk
and-
about it.
No, I just think it's completely unfair, and I guess you've got your requisite majority to allow the continuation. But, I'm opposed to it for reasons of good governance, and people have had opportunity. And written comments are not going to significantly change the outcome of the facts. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry.
Could-
Okay, so the motion to move, to continue the hearing to May 23rd, 6:30 here at Town Hall was made by Ken and second by Bob.
Mr. Chairman, could I make a request that written comment from any attorneys be provided 1 week prior to the hearing date? We've had 2 submissions now,
Right,
one of the night of the hearing and one this afternoon, which I would submit is causing a delay in this process. And in fairness to the applicant, if any information is being submitted, it should be 1 week prior to the
Isn't that
hearing.
our standard policy?
That is our
Right,
standard
but
policy.
you've
and I would
accepted
hope
it.
that anyone
And
would
that
adhere
applies
to
to
that.
both sides.
And that's fine, but I'm not submitting information in legal opinions on the night of the hearing, so I'd ask that be done a week prior.
Could I ask that we put, I know that's our policy. It's something we
You wanna
really
add it to the
enforce.
motion?
Yes, I want it to be
I'm happy to do
enforceable.
that.
Okay, so that's added to the motion. Any written comment concerning this project must be submitted
In order to be considered.
in order to be considered 1 week
7
prior
days?
to the meeting.
Okay.
May 23rd, 6:30 here at Town Hall. That motion was made by Ken and seconded
Second.
by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
And I
We take
think
like a
now's a good time to take a
30-second recess.
5-minute break.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, we are back from our 5-minute break. Thank you. Up next, we have application 115-18, Woods Hole Partners LLC, 533 Woods Hole Road, in Woods Hole. And Attorney Amon and Attorney Clower, thank you for allowing the other application to go before you.
Yeah, we're glad we did that. Happy we did it.
Thank you. Once again.
So for your record, of course, I'm Bob Ament. I'm an attorney, and I'm here along with Kevin Clower, my partner. And we represent Woods Hole Partners, and Mark Bogosian, principal, is here. And the engineering for this project is done by Matt Costa's firm, Cape and Islands Engineering, and Matt Costa is here. This is our third hearing. It's been 6 weeks, I think 6 weeks, since we last met with you on March 7th. We've done a few things. I'd like to just tell you some of those things and what we've submitted. I know you all generally come into the board and review materials, so hopefully you are familiar with the things we've submitted. And then I want to just briefly discuss some of the issues that have been raised both in correspondence and at the last meeting, particularly by residents of the Fern Lane subdivision that is to the rear of the Nautilus Dome property. Since the last meeting, we obtained a letter from the Falmouth Building Commissioner agreeing that the 2.5-story limitation does not apply in the Business Redevelopment District. From the Falmouth Building Commissioner, who is the zoning official, who's actually is the official with the authority to make those decisions. There was a letter, a very, very brief letter, issued by the Falmouth Town Council with a different opinion. We believe it was based on substantially insufficient information, that he only looked at the section of the zoning bylaw that has the general regulations as to dimensions, and wasn't aware when he made that decision and did not take into account the specific dimensional regulations that are set forth in section 240 of the zoning bylaw. In any case, we, on that issue, since your last hearing, in addition to obtaining the building commissioner's determination, we've also submitted 2 packages of material to the town council with copies to the zoning board and others, with I think a total of 11 Massachusetts court cases cited, which we think support our position. Basically, those decisions say that you have to read the bylaw as it reads. And if there's a section in the bylaw that might have referred to a different section of the bylaw as essentially a modifier, in this case, building height in the Business Redevelopment District simply says 35 feet. If they meant 2.5 stories up to 35 feet, essentially referring to a different section of the bylaw, the town should have said so. And that's what the courts say. To insert, the court decisions say that. To assume that that language would be, should be inserted would be essentially legislating and putting language into a statute which doesn't exist. Anyway, 11 cases were cited to support various aspects of our argument. All the cases cited were copied and included, and I've talked a couple of times with the town council. I know that he's intending to issue a further opinion. Whether he changes his mind based on the information we've provided, I don't know. I can't put words in his mouth. We feel strongly that we're absolutely correct. And we also think that the impact on the project and the neighbors doesn't make a lot of difference. Whether it's 2.5 stories or 3 stories, it's still 35 feet. And yes, the mass of the third floor might be somewhat less, but we think that the town intentionally left those words out. The purpose was to encourage development in the business redevelopment along East Main Street and a couple of other sections that have been rezoned business redevelopment. Our position tracks the plain language of the bylaw. So I hope that you have reviewed the information that I've sent. I know that town council will, and eventually, and he told me today, fairly soon, he'll be able to issue a decision, and I understand he is talking to the town planner and others about the issue. Okay, so a lot of information has been submitted to you on the question of what the allowed building height is and whether we're in compliance. I also submitted earlier this month, in response to a request actually by Mr. Dugan, that we submit a letter that describes the future use of the dome. And I sent a letter, I think it's 3 or 4 pages long, that discussed the possible uses and the funding of the maintenance of the dome and a bunch of issues about it. What I did not do and could not do is give you a precise use of what the dome will be. It could be community space for the housing that's to be created, as was the intention for the Wise Living development approved in 2008. But we've, as you know, not incorporated the dome into the buildings. We've left it as a separate structure, though we're proposing to build a new access building connection to the rear small structure, about 600 square feet, that will provide handicap bathrooms and elevator access and a foyer to get into and up to the dome. So we're having an independent building, and I've suggested some limits on what the uses might be. Has to be a nonprofit use. Has to be a use that would be allowed in the business redevelopment district. It has to be a low waste generating use because we only have so many gallons of waste that can be treated on the site in addition to the housing that's proposed. Has to be low traffic generating and have relatively few parking spaces. And we've given some suggestions about that. But I also included a whole page of proposed conditions that the Board of Appeals might like to consider in approving the project that would apply to the dome. That was another submission that was given to the board. Now, we've made a bunch of changes to the plans. One of the changes was to reduce the building height of the 2 larger buildings, Building E and Building A. There was an error in the calculation of the height shown on the previously approved plans. And so we've brought down the height in order to comply with the 35-foot limit. That's 35 feet as defined in the bylaw, but the buildings now are lower and they conform to the 35-foot height limit. We also rotated this building, Building B, just a little bit so that it turned the building a little bit away from the street. And we did that simply so that there would be no decrease whatsoever in the view shed of or from the dome. There is now a 135-degree view shed this way and the other way, as shown on a different plan that we've submitted to you. It was previously to be slightly reduced to 133 degrees by doing a little twisting of that building. It's now the same 135 degrees, so that's a change. We've also made some changes to the easterly driveway, that one, to satisfy requirements of the Department of Transportation for the curb cut. And the effect of that was to actually widen the driveway behind it so that we now have 24-foot driveway instead of what I recall was 20 feet. And we still have the parking along that driveway to serve the dome, whatever use it will be. But that now complies with the regulations with regard to the width of the two-way traffic aisle. Those changes and some other details are set forth in correspondence that was submitted to the board by Attorney Clower on April 9th. We also submitted an additional report from the traffic consultant. That's Kim Hazavarshian, who is a well-respected traffic engineer from TEPP Inc., which is, I believe, in Andover. They actually did their traffic studies for the Wise Living project of more than a decade ago. We did submit earlier this year a 2018 report that they did to follow up on their 2008 report. Mr. Hazavarshian met with Matt Costa on the site earlier this month and actually physically measured site distances. Previously, from his previous visits to the site, they had estimated it. In one case, the estimate was 570 feet of distance. The actual measurement was 637 feet, I think was what it was. But in all cases, the site distance exceeds the safe stopping distance, which is the standard calculation based on the speed and the curvature of the road. So it exceeds what is a safe stopping distance. Now, there are other calculations which Mr. Hazavarshian says are optional, that can be done different ways, but he says that the state recognizes SSD calculated as he did as their standard. There was a meeting at the Department of Transportation on April 9th that Matt Costa attended. So did the town planner, Tom Bott, and Mr. Hazavarshian, who met with the state DOT officials. Matt reports that they are satisfied with the, he thinks that they're satisfied with the site distances. Remember, this is an existing driveways for a relatively low traffic generating use, and we can't change the location of those driveways given the site. We're splitting the traffic between two driveways, and they apparently are satisfied with it, provided that there is a condition that the vegetation in the DOT-controlled roadway in this area, that it be maintained to maximize the views. And of course, the applicant is perfectly happy to do that. DOT also said, get your local approvals and then come back to us for the state approval. But we now have submitted 3 reports from a qualified traffic engineer saying that the intersections, that is the driveway intersections, will operate safely. So those are the things that we submitted. I'd like to talk, as I said, a little bit about some of the concerns that were raised, primarily about the largest building, the one further to the rear, that's Building A. And that's a building that is a long building, and it's 35 feet tall, and the neighbors are concerned that from Fern Lane residences, people will see a massive structure. It was suggested that the hillside is to be totally deforested, and I'd like to tell you that that isn't true. In fact, the plan in front of you shows the limit of work. The limit of work. There'd be no cutting of anything in connection with the construction beyond that. And it's the dotted line, if you can see it running there.
Sometimes the mouse up there can help you.
Let me see if I can do it. Thank you. Sometimes this is the type of thing I need help with from Kevin. But, how am I doing? Is that
There's a little arrow.
Yeah.
It's a hand.
I thought I saw a little arrow. There, it is, or a hand.
It's a hand.
Right there. This is the limit of work. And it averages over 50 feet from the property line. The building itself is at its closest 70 feet from the property line. Now keep in mind that the required setback for structures in the business redevelopment district, as in residential districts, is 10 feet. By agreement with the Woods Hole Community Association, we have a 70-foot setback. And that's pretty significant. And what I'm telling you is that more than 50 feet of it, of that setback, is a no-touch, it's past the limit of work where the vegetation is going to remain. The town's engineers have reviewed these plans tremendously carefully and had to respond to a lot of concerns. But one of the concerns is that there be no increase in runoff off of the lot. And Matt Costa would tell you that there will be no increase in runoff and that they've taken care of all the runoff. And I'd like to quote from a letter that was submitted by a Fern Lane neighbor at the last meeting in discussing what their concerns are. It says, a private home under construction on Harbor Hill Road deforested about an acre plus 2 years ago, creating erosion that damaged trees with silt runoff and drained all the way down to the stream in the oceanographic property that's next to this. So what did he say? He said a private residence was built and it had all of these impacts. That the problem, he says, still has not been fully mitigated. We have a 70-foot setback. We have a 50-foot no-touch limit of work. We have engineers' calculations that show there won't be runoff from this property. Yes, it's a big building and it's 35 feet tall, but it's 70 feet away from the property line. And it conforms in all respects to the zoning bylaw. There's concern about shadow. The building has been lowered a couple of feet. Maybe that'll make a difference on the relatively few days of a year where that could be a factor. But the zoning bylaw doesn't protect a neighbor against somebody building their house 35 feet tall, 10 feet away from their property line. We have an unusual, perhaps, topographic situation here. There's a pretty steep rise between the property line at the back of the Fern Lane properties and the best site for building, a site that happens to be 70 or so feet away from the property line. So we're building on the higher portion of the property. There's nothing wrong with that. The zoning bylaw does not protect a neighbor against somebody building a structure within the allowed height on the location of their property that happens to be higher. And this is a property that, given its business redevelopment zoning, can be by right, without need for a special permit, 33 units of housing. You could build just as big a building there, or a series of buildings near each other, 35 feet tall, that would have the same impact as the building that's being proposed. you need to consider the suitability of the site under the present zoning. Neighbors referenced a 1971 special permit, a 1980 special permit. That was before the town chose to rezone this property to business redevelopment. And business redevelopment allows 60% lot coverage. We have 40% lot coverage. That's a really big reduction. To suggest that this property is not suitable for the proposed use. And by the way, the neighbors didn't, they referred to a 1971 and 1980 special permit decisions. They didn't refer to the 2008 special permit decision that this board approved the same number of units in a vastly bigger building, in which Cape Cod Commission decision is still in effect for that building. And based on working with the Woods Hole Community Association, we have a plan which, in the amendment to covenant that they signed, they agreed to. So we've done quite a bit of work in the last 6 weeks since the last hearing. We've, of course, also been meeting with Planning Board for site plan review. We think we're getting close to the end of that process. I think that anybody who has observed the meetings with the Planning Board would agree with my assessment that there will be, we think, a unanimous endorsement of this project through the site plan review process. There will be conditions, of course. We hope to have that soon in order that the Board of Appeals can make a decision. The board can't make a decision until it has a site plan review decision. So your deliberation, this hearing will have to be continued. And we, through discussion, think that it can be continued to May 2nd. That's 2 weeks from now. And hopefully you'll be able to make a decision that night. If you have questions about anything I've said, if you've got questions about other issues I haven't addressed, if you have questions that either Mark Bogosian or Matt Costa should address, we really want to satisfy you, and I really appreciate your time late this evening.
Thank you, Attorney Emmett. And just a bit of housekeeping, well, by my clock, it's 9:28. We typically wrap things up at 9:30. Does anyone want to make a motion to extend the time?
I'll move that we continue for, what should I say, another 20 minutes?
I'll second that.
Okay. Motion was made by Ken, second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Mr. Costa thinks it's important he adds something about the drainage.
Certainly.
I just want to clarify, with respect to the runoff coming off the site. I heard a pretty funny fellow characterize this as buckets of water leaving the site. So on the back of this hill, there's natural grade there that is sloping down. There's water leaving the site right now. Let's just say there's 8 buckets of water leaving the site from that area. That's gonna stay that way. Everything that we're developing, we're capturing and we're controlling. So there is water leaving the site now, and there is water leaving the site when we're done, but there isn't any more leaving the site. And the areas where it's leaving is primarily the naturally vegetated areas. So I'm hoping that makes sense.
Thank you.
I had a question for Mr. Emmett.
Sure, Jerry, you can start us off.
You're proposing Thursday, May 2nd, which means a couple of days after the planning board makes the decision. Will you be prepared to either submit your comments as soon as you heard their planning board's decision? So, we just recommended, we don't like to get letters the day of.
If everything works out, and this is somewhat of an ask of the planning board, and it's being considered, I understand. We are on their agenda for next week. We were there this week. We will be there next week. Our hope, and the planning board asked the town planner to begin drafting a decision. Our hope is that that is advanced far enough next Tuesday that we could then look forward to finalizing it a week later if the board is able to meet then, if it can't resolve it next Tuesday. Our intention certainly will be to, I mean, this case is not like the first two cases you heard tonight, you know? This is a big case, and it requires a very well thought-out decision, and that's partly why I submitted to you a full page of suggested conditions for the dome that I tried to think what would you want, and how do we assure people that what will be done is what we say will be done. If we have not changed it, we have to come back to you. Anyway, yes, we'll try to respond as quickly as possible, but it is a complicated thing, and that's why we need to get going with the drafting of it, so that, of these decisions, so that we can finalize it. We've been at the local decisions now for a long time. We dealt with getting the Cape Cod Commission to agree to the basic changes. We have to go back to them with some, because there are some modifications. We have to do that. We spent a year discussing this project with the Woods Hole Community Association, leading to their amended covenant. We spent the better part of a year in discussions with the group, a nonprofit arts group interested in the future of the dome. We've been at this for 2.5 years. And we still have to go to the Historical Commission, and we felt to be doing the zoning and the planning, we couldn't be doing the historical at the same time. We needed to know the project is approved. Then we'll deal with primarily the dome. If there were any necessary aesthetic changes to buildings, that's a relatively small aspect of this project, and we would know we were going to go forward to it. But it's, for all sorts of reasons, taken too long, and the owner of the property is getting pretty frustrated. We need to bring this part of the permitting process to a close and then move on to the historical, which is going to be very detailed. We will need a state preservation restriction on the dome. The Cape Cod Commission says so. The Board of Appeals might say so. And we're going to have, that's going to be involved the State Historical Commission. We still have a lot of work to do on that aspect of it. But in the overall scheme, that is, while the dome is important, and we are committed as part of this project, if we can go forward with it, to properly preserve and then in perpetuity maintain it. And I've told you in my correspondence how that will happen. We know that's going to happen. The specifics of it will be controlled by people, in the historical community. But we need approvals for a project. Otherwise, the dome continues to deteriorate, and the property doesn't get used, and it's an eyesore. It's a danger. It has sat for years and years, and now someone has come along who's able and willing to do a project there. So I hope you see it that way.
A follow-up, just a suggestion, because I don't need your response. I strongly suggest you submit these conditions to the abutters or the neighborhood association, so they'll know it on the last page of the letter you sent.
Well, it's all public information now, but if, that's fine.
Thank you.
Actually, we've intended to, but haven't, and I'm glad you remind me, that letter about the dome, I think it's important to submit it to the community association so they know our present thinking about it.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion.
So two questions. So you did make, you did reduce the building height a little bit,
2 feet.
2 feet. Is it 33? Is that, did I read that on the plan? A plan, or is
Well,
it
I'm
still
not sure what you're
35?
at as measured under the zoning bylaw, it's 35 feet high.
35 feet. But in order to reach 35 feet conformity, you had to do a 2-foot.
We did two
reduction.
things. We changed the roof line in some places, we also lowered the building. In lowering the building, we had to make a bunch of changes to the grading and drainage. So it's been a lot of work.
Was there any change to the third floor massing?
I'm not able to answer that question, but probably Mark can. We know no? So the building is between, it's between 2.5 and 3 stories. It's not
For the record, Mark Bogosian, one of the owners in the project. In the design of the third floor, calculated the floor coverage. The roof wouldn't change, it just changes the unit sizes by drastically bringing them inside. From the exterior, it wouldn't affect the way the building's gonna appear, the elevations. It really has to do with using that space, whether it's just a wall and unusable space, unfinished space, or if it's finished space, part of a closet, a bedroom, et cetera.
Maybe it would help I think what Mark is saying, that you don't measure as the space on the third floor if it doesn't have a certain headroom, and I think it's 5 feet. So below that, behind that knee wall, the question is what use are you making of it? So you could comply with the 2.5 stories with either no changes to the exterior or minimal changes to the exterior. And frankly, I think that's what town meeting was thinking when it changed the zoning bylaw to allow 3 stories. It wasn't changing how high buildings could be along Main Street or in the business redevelopment district. It was taking away a limitation that really might not change what it looks like at all, because the third story, that is the portion that would
Who knows
face
what
street,
they were-
it could be the whole front of the
Who knows
property.
what they were thinking? I think they voted what was put before them. But I just was curious as to whether that third floor had shrunk at all in terms of the footprint in any of your, and the answer is no. And then the last question I had was, when we next take this up, are you expecting, we'll certainly close the hearing, we'll get the information from the planning board and so forth. Are you expecting us to actually give you a positive vote?
No, because I just think that this is a case.
You need to draft.
You have to draft a decision.
Okay.
My hope is that you would, at a minimum, be able to
We can-
instruct the administrator to draft a favorable decision, maybe indicate the types of things should be. This might be an instance, given the complexity of it, the details, where the board might suggest to the administrator, working with the applicant on just review language, making sure that it works, and then it would have to come back to you for a decision. But hopefully, I mean, it's been 6 weeks since our last hearing.
Yep.
We would need it needs to move more quickly.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to
No.
have in my own mind a kind of anticipation of where I need to be.
Ed, any questions?
Yeah, what is the time frame once all the approvals have happened? What's the time frame to build all 43 units?
We intend to get started as soon as possible, and one of our concerns in the permitting process, as well as the development process, the 2.5 years, is depending on the economy, if something drastically changes, the time frame could be extended on when we finish all the units, meaning we would wait to build one of the larger buildings if something changes and we feel that the market wouldn't allow those to sell at a rather normal pace.
Well, just a minute, what would be a normal, we talking, which building would you build first?
Well, the intention is to build the duplexes at the front of the property, the 3 duplexes first, along with all of the affordable units. Our agreement with the Woods Hole Community Association, the covenant, which would be recorded at the Registry of Deeds, and this can be a condition of your decision as well, is that the not more than, I think it is, 4 of the market rate units can be occupied before the affordable rental units are all completed, and I think it's occupied, actually rented. So that's important to understand. And the, obviously, the construction period for those duplexes will not be as long as the bigger buildings. And the thinking is, and they're also in a very desirable location. So the goal is to be able to recapture early on some of the investment that's been made, also help to pay for the affordable units. So the schedule is to do the duplexes and the affordable units first.
And if I can piggyback on that, I haven't spoken for this hearing tonight, so for the record, my name is Kevin Clower. I'm one of the attorneys. I think it would be envisioned as a 3-phase project. The first phase Bob described as the duplexes, the 3 duplexes in the front, and then the affordable units. The second phase would likely be Building E, which is the building closest to the dome, and the last phase would likely be Building A. And I think it would make the most sense to move progressively towards the rear of the project.
And then there's the dome. I think that effort on the dome begins immediately, but that's a significant planning effort. And we will not be able to complete the renovations to the dome prior to the intended occupancy of at least the initial units. But we will have to bond to guarantee that, and we'll have to have a plan in place to make sure that that gets done.
At what point in time, as far as numbers of units built, would the homeowners association be set up to take over from the developer?
I think it's accurate to say we haven't really thought through the answer to that. It is not unusual for a developer to, retain certain rights until the property's been sold out. In this particular case, the developer, at least a subsidiary, that is Mark Bogosian, is going to own the 4 rental units, so he will have a continuing involvement in it. So I don't know when you say take over, I don't know the answer to that.
Years ago, it used to be 75% of the units were occupied.
I can't tell you, because I don't know. I'm not up to date on the, whether there's a statutory requirement of a takeover at a
I
certain
looked and
time.
I couldn't find it.
Yeah. Well, would not surprise me. I think it may be the case that the developer can retain control in various ways, as long as he owns a unit. That is, changes can't be made that would affect his ability to finish the project. What I do want to say about the homeowners association, and it somewhat goes to maybe the genesis of your question, and that is the role of the homeowners association with respect to the dome. And I think I've addressed that in the correspondence I sent to you. The homeowners association is going to have a basically perpetual responsibility with respect to the dome.
Big unknown.
What's that?
It's a big unknown.
Well,
somebody buying a unit.
well, except that the dome is going to be put in proper condition by the developer. As I said in my correspondence, I put down, because it was a previous figure, estimated that he'd spend a minimum of $500,000. Mark said, no, that's not right. It's going to cost over $1 million to renovate that. That's going to be the developer's responsibility as a condition of your decision, Cape Cod Commission decision, the preservation restrictions, so on. So it's going to be put in proper condition. And then I think that the developer can require, as each unit is sold, that there be a sum of money put into a reserve fund for the dome that's from each sale. Maybe it'll be $1,000, maybe it'll be $2,000, but to start to have a figure that is essentially an endowment fund, a reserve fund for that building. And as expenses come up over the decades to come, we have a condominium association of expensive, relatively so, properties with a lien on everybody's property and with a responsibility to contribute to keep this building up as part of the common elements, the common property of the condominium. It's enforceable by the lien on people's units. It's a well-known process. Banks know all about condominium liens and so on. You sell the property, you have to get a so-called 6D certificate saying that the assessments are paid up to date. I don't think there's a better way to assure the future of the dome than what we're proposing. And we're not relying on any public money to do it.
And we do only have a few more minutes of that time extension.
Maybe I could
Bob,
just
anything?
list some questions, because I don't want to cut time constraints. Regarding the business redevelopment district,
Came a long way to be here, you've given all the time to the developers, please leave time for responses from the community.
Bob?
I just have some quick questions. Regarding business redevelopment district, where it doesn't allow parking in the front of the buildings, how do the duplex parking and also the first few spaces on the dome comply? I'll just list a bunch. As far as your historic, I know you haven't gone in front of historic, could their decision at historic constrain what your options are for dome usage?
Well, first of all, we don't know what the restraints will be of the Historical Commission, and I don't want to even predict what they might be. But first of all, the required parking for the duplexes is all inside. There is space that's available for extra parking, but it's not required parking. The landscaping is also designed so that you will not see the surface, that parking, from the street. So the required parking is all, like I said,
So
in
if they park in the
garages.
driveways, that would comply?
What's
I
that?
just want to make sure it's in compliance. So if they park in the driveways, would that comply, or would they not be allowed to park in the driveways?
We think that the requirement is that the required parking be not in the front. I also think that when you make a decision, and if you approve this project.
We could condition though.
Yeah,
On-
you
on the
could. And
eight-
as far as the spaces next to the dome, those, for one thing, are not going to be paved spaces. They're also existing. We're not talking about expanding that parking exists.
But so you floated the idea of maybe studio spaces, and I think you said 7 or 8. Let's say there were just even 4.
Yeah.
If the artist used 4 of the spaces, and that leaves you with 3 plus 1 handicap.
But we haven't counted those spaces as our required parking for any of the residential development.
No, I understand. I'm talking about the usage of whatever you decide with the dome itself. If there's no place to expend parking for whoever's visiting or using the dome space,
Right.
you're limited to 8. So
Yeah.
that's going to extremely limit whatever your usage can be.
Well, it could somewhat limit it. However, remember that parking can, when you have a certain amount of parking, it can be reduced by the Board of Appeals. We think that the 8 spaces there is the right number to show there. We think that whatever other uses there will be some possibility of some of the people using the dome may be residents. There's also parking in the area. And I put you can put a limit on the number of, and the use of the building with respect to the number of parking spaces that are available. I suggested that in my correspondence. If we want to do something that's going to take more spaces, we'd have to come back to you. Let me give you an example. There's enough septic flow available. I think I figured for a public meeting space, and I'm only thinking about it being a space that could be available for like meetings of the Woods Hole Community Association or other nonprofits. That was a use that's suggested in the covenant with the Woods Hole Community Association. So what numbers are we talking about? If you can only have I think we have 217 gallons per day that's available. It's 3 gallons per day per person. That would be 70 people. We don't want to have 70 people in there. You want to have a meeting with 20 people? Yeah, we can accommodate that. People can walk from the village. There are other places to park. It's not too far to walk from. But we also don't have the parking to put 70 people, so we're not going to be doing that. There has to be some sense in what happens here. Our goal is to not have a high, dense use that's going to have an adverse impact on the residences. So I recognize your problem, but we don't want to create more parking than is needed.
And you can just submit the reply, but I just wanted to know if the timeline changes on the dome renovation affect the covenant at all.
Mr. Chair.
Right, we've hit the 20-minute extension that Ken voted upon, so.
I would like to extend it to at least 10 minutes, at least let the gentleman in the back, and I think the town planner had requested some time.
All right, Jerry, so you're extending, making a motion to extend the time by 10 minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Sorry to cut you off, Bob.
Oh, that's okay.
Should we recognize Tom?
Sure. Does town planner wish to weigh in?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, I'm Tom Bottom, the town planner here in Falmouth, Mass. And while I've been to a number of ZBA meetings, this might be the first time I've addressed you, so thank you for having me. I'll be brief. The planning board is working through site plan issues. I am the person with the abundance of caution who is concerned about things such as the site distance. That's one of the reasons I was at the Mass DOT office. Nothing that we talked about at Mass DOT seemed insurmountable, so we should be able to work through those things, but there are some site distance issues to be addressed. The planning board is meeting on this on the 23rd. I have asked the board if they're able to meet on the 30th as well. And if so, it's conceivable we could have a decision fully voted by the 30th in order to accommodate your May 2nd meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bott. Okay, I think it's only fair to turn it over to public comment, given the time restrictions. And sir, would you like to weigh in?
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the committee and the town employees who gave so generously of their time to me today when I compromised everybody's productivity. I'm David Epstein, 15 Fern Lane, also speaking for other Fern Lane neighbors. A couple of points to Mr. Ament, who I also thank for giving away 2 hours of my life to the previous case. Touting a 70-foot setback was just the good luck on our part, and taking credit for what nature gave us in terms of the less desirable developability of the lower part of the lot there is probably kind of on the erroneous side, and suggesting that it's the developer or the developer's largesse is, I think, utterly erroneous. The 2008 decision that he also referred to was a different building further away from the neighborhood down the hill, and that is in large part where we haven't addressed that and had far less impact on the abutters. Now, I will go as quickly as I can. I understand that there is still an open question about whether the business redevelopment label has to pay attention to the extant bylaws regulating the building height and what constitutes a third story. And I dearly hope that this completely residential proposal will be made to conform to existing bylaws that are intended to protect the neighborhood and the town from zealous overdevelopment. I have my own feeling that this plot should never have been developed under the Business Redevelopment District moniker. However, that is as it is, and I cannot say anything more about that. I will only say that looking at the elevations provided by the developer, this is a very large, very high development that sits relative to the abutters on a higher hill, and the sheer size of the proposal will powerfully, quote, overbalance its beneficial effects on the neighborhood. And this language is taken from the Chapter 240-216 area titled Decision, which is the criteria by which the Zoning Board of Appeals must make their evaluation. From my neighbor, Tom Renshaw, this proposal is conscious disregard of the feelings of the local residents. let me say plainly, shrink this proposal by at least 1/3 in both building size and number of units. Disallow the special permit increase from 6 units per acre to 8 units per acre. Said Mr. Renshaw in his letter to the editor, the Zoning Board of Appeals is being asked to allow a variance to this in the form of a special permit to increase the size of this development from 30, or as Mr. Raymond suggested, 33 units allowed to 43 units or 8 units per acre. I believe that, Renshaw talking, I believe that such an increase will dramatically increase the stress on the community without the demonstrated hardship to the developer that would be required to justify such a variance. Granting such a permit, says Mr. Renshaw, quote, amounts to a gift to the developer at the expense of the community. The Zoning Board of Appeals, quote, shall grant a special permit only upon its written determination that the proposed use will not have adverse effects which overbalance its beneficial effects on either the neighborhood or the town in view of the particular characteristics of the site. The determination shall indicate that the proposed use will be in harmony with the general purpose and intent of this chapter, and it goes on letters A through H. I'm going to quickly address only 3 of those letters. A, the adequacy of the site in terms of the size for the proposed use. My take is that the proposed use is twice as large as the site will accommodate. The size and scope of this project will dwarf anything in the neighborhood. This is residential in nature. It is not a hotel. It is not an institution. The other residential uses abutting and in the neighborhood are all single-family homes. The disharmony of this proposed use is overwhelming and certainly overbalances its beneficial effects. Letter B, suitability of the site for the proposed use. In the sense that on 2 sides there are hotels and the transients that comes therewith, the zoning board would have to decide whether there is or is not harmony with a monstrous residential facility. I'm gonna address traffic. I think they've done a good job on that. Impact on the neighborhood visual character, including views and vistas. Fernlade abutters will be hugely impacted by the proposed 4-story rear facade of Building A. The proposal has nothing even remotely in harmony with the visual character of a street of sedate single-family homes. If the board wants to consider the harmony of shingle-style construction, let the board members stand next to their own homes and imagine these towering structures as their own neighbor. The application for a special permit should be rejected handily and easily. The developer is bringing to bear a bevy of experts in the form of attorneys, engineers, and other professional planners. The ZBA is charged with defending the rights of the neighborhood. I say to the members of the board, see your duty clearly, hear what I am saying. You must reject this proposal for a special permit on the basis of the disharmony overbalancing its beneficial effects. But further, please see as well that when individuals who are not possessed of a war chest of expertise and cash come before you, it is to invoke your responsibility to level the playing field. I'm not against the development of 533 Woods Hole Road, but I am against the granting of a special permit where the existing bylaws and regulations encourage a more sane proposal. Would 30 units be in harmony with the neighborhood? Far from it, but it would be in order of magnitude more tolerable. Should the developer contend that the property is not developable without a special permit, then the developer is contending that their own due diligence was faulty, and the developer should not then lay the consequences of this fictional error at the town's feet and demand redress in the form of special permitting. I invoke again Mr. Renshaw's words and implore you not to, quote, give a gift to the developer at the expense of the community. I thank the committee.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project tonight? Okay. Seeing none. Is that it? Yeah.
So I guess we move to continue again to May 2nd then?
Marie, is that May 2nd, okay?
Was May 2nd? Okay, so 6:30 here at Town Hall, May 2nd.
And then TJ, you just need to get that
Oh,
signed.
and for the applicant, we do have the execution of the extension fee to Okay, so that's May 2nd, 6:30 here at Town Hall. Motion was made by Ken. Was there a second?
Second.
Second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well, Sari, Kim, and Paul just left.
Do we have any other agenda items?
She just said, we just.
Yep, we do have the minutes from February 21st, March 7th, and March 21st. So everyone
Request that we waive all this?
waive all the open meeting agenda items?
Yes.
I think that's fair, so.
You're gonna vote the
Right.
minutes?
I make a
What's
motion that
that?
we
Vote
waive.
the minutes?
Vote the minutes? Well, how about we vote the minutes? So everyone had a chance to review February 21st, March 7th, and March 21st?
Yes,
Yes.
I wasn't at all of them, but I
Yeah,
did review
right.
them.
Anyone want to make a motion to approve them?
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve by Jerry, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion to waive the
You
remaining
need to sign as well.
open meeting.
All right, and we'll waive the, or we'll table the rest of
Table, I
our
like that.
items for next time.
Amen.
Second.
I typically just do.
We don't usually.
Yeah, table is.
You have the biggest pull. Try, call her cell now
Yeah,
and just see if they'll wait.
Tell her we're on the way.
Because they just sent me a picture, see if you can get them to wait.
Tell her we're on the way.
With the Smackers table?
Order me a Glenlivet.
Yeah.
They'll be closing. 10 o'clock.